Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets?
There are no regrets this evening.
Thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary interest, Council? Thank you. We could, it would help us if we had a mover and seconder to resolve in a committee of the whole. Councillor Khan, Councillor Lapworth, all in favor? Opposed, if any? We are now resolved into committee of the whole for the public's benefit. That puts us into a form of our meeting where the rules are somewhat relaxed and we can give matters more attention than we can in the formality of a regular council meeting. And this is the ideal environment for planning decisions. Before we begin, we're going to have a number of public hearings tonight. And for all of our public hearings, the following applies. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting, or make written submission to the Town of Oakville in respect of a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and or plan of subdivision or condominium, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Town Council to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the Board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. And for greater clarity, it's either oral or written. You don't have to do both. So if you've provided us with written, you don't need to read it to us. You can trust us to read what you've written. On the other hand, if you wish to put belt and suspenders on your submission and both submit it in writing and orally, we will listen to the oral version as well. Council, to begin, we have a number of consent items, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 2 confidential consent items, C1 and C2. And I would like to suggest that discussion items 14, 15, and 16 might also be dealt with by consent, but of course it's up to you. Councillor Johnston?
I'll move that.
Thank you. So is there any discussion of any of these items? I understand, hold on, we have one from Councillor Elgar. Oh, I'll do that in just a second. I'm looking for Councillor Elgar's, thank you. So Councillor Johnston, having regard to item number 3 on the consent agenda, do you have before you a suggestion from Councillor Elgar?
Yes, as amended.
So are you moving that too?
Yes, I am.
Let me read it for the public. Item 3, is that right, Councillor Elgar?
That's correct. Yeah.
That clause 39 of the subdivision agreement be amended to read that the owner agrees to conduct a pump test, survey of the static water level, and quality testing of all wells within 500 meters of the plan. The owner further agrees to resolve any claims of well interruption due to construction of municipal services to the satisfaction of the Region of Halton's Development Coordinator. So with all of that before us, Councillor Adams.
Could we just double check there's no members of the audience here for any of those items?
Oh, thank you. I meant, that's the other note I have here from the clerk. Councillor Demoff.
Does staff have a presentation on the in-zone? Because if they do, I'd like to see it.
Okay. So Councillor Johnston will, we separate things on request, so that's now separated. Before we proceed to vote on items 14, 15, and on items 15 and 16, I want to poll the members of the audience if there's any individuals here with information for council on item 15 or 16 on tonight's agenda, which more specifically and particularly is the design guidelines and the Livable by Design Awards terms of reference. No one? All right. I'll put the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Those matters are now adopted. Now, Councillor Demoff, we can turn to item 14. And Mr. Nethery, you're here. Councillor Demoff, before Mr. Nethery begins, I just want to say on behalf of the members of council who have served now for several months on the subcommittee, the in-zone subcommittee, I think you're going to enjoy this. We've been very impressed with both the work that Mr. Nethery and his associates have done and the quality of the presentations that he's given us. He does have the thankless job of trying to make, I mean, really, this is, as I've said before, this is the most important part of translating the principles and policies of the Livable Oakville official plan into reality, because this is making the underlying zoning bylaws conform with the bold vision of Livable Oakville. And it's been a matter of changing, of going through, is it 800 pages of previous zoning bylaw, Mr. Nethery?
Through your worship, I believe we're at 850 pages today.
Yeah,
yes.
so it's got to be, it's at one and the same time, it's the most important thing to complete the Livable Oakville vision, and it's got to be the definition of tedium at the same time when you consider the volume of paper you've got to go through. So, we will now turn to Mr. Nethery to make tedium exciting.
I'll do my best tonight, your worship and members of council, and to do it as expediently as possible for the benefit of everybody in the room tonight. We're here tonight to provide a brief summary on our first draft, numbered version 1.0 of the 2014 zoning bylaw. There's a lot of content in the document that is before you tonight, and a little bit of content that is still coming forward. So what we were hoping to focus our presentation on tonight was the process that has been undertaken up to this point to create the document, the principles that have informed the creation of this draft, and the opportunities for continued review, input, and for individuals to inform themselves about this project, concluding with the steps that staff will be taking after tonight's presentation. And while I certainly appreciate your kind words, your worship, I would be remiss to not, if I didn't recognize the many staff members who've been involved in this project. First and foremost among them, Ms. Boddington, who I know is behind me, Mr. Rubik and Mr. Sunderland, who are outside tidying up our drop-in workshop right now, and Mr. Birch and Froze, who've been putting in overtime to make sure that the graphics look the way that they're supposed to be looking. Our four advisory contacts, including Ms. Anderson and Ms. Childs, who are here tonight, Mr. Doe and Tudor, who send the regrets. Our 24 technical advisory contacts from engineering and parks and recreation, from the library, from conservation, Halton, and all sorts of related agencies. The wonderful input from the in-zone subcommittee received over the last year and 9 months, and from the content received from over 200 individual points of contact from the consultation work staff have been undertaking to date. So over the last several months, or 1 year and 9 months as my talking points have been stating, staff have presented a number of technical papers to the in-zone subcommittee. We've had discussions with the committee on issues related to those papers, being the individual uses that are proposed to be permitted in these zones, the numbers and the standards that are associated with those zones, certain changes in regulation with respect to very specific issues. All that together has produced a number of zoning regulations which have been consolidated, edited, and reviewed at least 5 times now internally to result in the lavender copy that's before you tonight. We've also been out in the community running our All About Zoning workshops and facilitating a series of open houses on design issues and the zoning in low-density residential neighborhoods. This iterative process altogether has resulted in the document that is before you for information tonight. The principles that have informed this draft were established in the terms of reference that you approved in October of 2011. First and foremost, we are implementing the Livable Oakville plan. We cannot have a new zoning bylaw that does not conform to that document, that does not implement that document. Staff have prepared a document that, in our opinion, is getting us to that point. Where we need additional direction to what conformity looks like, we've set 8 additional principles as well. Without going into too much detail, those standards and approaches end up resulting in a number of approaches to developing the regulations that are in that document. It involves carrying forward parts of the current 1984-63 zoning bylaw. It also contains parts from our North Oakville zoning bylaw, 2009-189, with various tweaks and adjustments that respond to the development situations and the current existing conditions that are south of Dundas Street. We've looked at best practices from neighboring municipalities and have adapted those where appropriate to fit that same Oakville context. And it's also introducing a number of new concepts which are quite, I'll say, adventurous and forward-thinking for a municipality of Oakville size. We're looking at surface parking area restrictions on the sizes of those, on locations of those, of landscaping around and within those as appropriate. As your worship has said on many occasions, zoning is a very key place for the visions and policies of the livable Oakville plan to become enforceable and applicable rules and regulations. To put it proverbially speaking, the rubber hits the road with the zoning document itself. And it's incumbent on any persons in the town with an interest in these rules and how these processes work to make themselves aware of this draft, to inform themselves of this content, and if they have any questions, to please reach out to staff and see if we can get those issues addressed. So, 850 pages of current zoning. The draft itself said 350 some odd pages and counting. How do we make this as easy as possible for residents and businesses to address? Our first step are to hold a series of townwide open houses. There is a change with respect to the map that is shown on screen right now and the content that's in your staff report, in that it turns out there are 3 St. Joseph's churches in Oakville, and I booked the wrong one. So we have a very simple fix, is to move one of the town hall sessions up to St. Joseph's Portuguese Church in Palermo. This ensures that all 6 wards have an open house as well. It gives us a commercial and employment-focused open house at Town Hall as well, and one bonus evening here as well. At each of those 8 sessions, we'll have draft content with us. The event will be flooded with staff to be able to answer those sorts of questions, and is probably the best opportunity for the ordinary resident to come out and interact one-on-one with staff. We're also continuing to work away on building individual PDFs that are tied with some basic information to properties through our Explore Oakville public GIS framework. The first draft of, sorry, I'm one paragraph ahead of myself. There is functionality within our online GIS today to allow for a resident to find their property, to click on it, and be presented with some basic, with a URL rather, that contains some information. The solution that staff are working on right now would be linking that URL to a PDF with a basic disclaimer and some basic zoning information as to the regulations that apply. There's some internal software updates that I am by no means educated upon enough to comment further that may change how this approach works further on, but this is, in the interim, this is what we are working towards. And we also continue to meet with our various stakeholder groups and offer our on-demand All About Zoning workshop to members of the public. Or if the Jays game isn't exactly doing it for you, we do offer it online at the URL that's shown on screen. It's also linked through our project website itself. The technical papers that we have presented, the presentations that we are delivering, the content, our consultation information and history, as well as the draft documents themselves, are all housed on our project webpage. That is the best source of the most recent and up-to-date information on this project for anybody who is looking out for it. And with respect to the continued development of the new special provisions, staff are providing status updates through this website in terms of when the documents would next be updated and the remaining information completed. So going forward for today, there are a number of issues. They are flagged with disclaimers in the draft bylaw today that staff are looking to do continued review, research, and input on. 4 of them are shown up on screen right now. And what the public the public does need to continue to be involved through to the end of this project, which is still targeted for early in 2014. That is largely because if an item does look good today and it's satisfactory to the individual reader, because of the comprehensive nature of this document and the fact that it's basically a system that is being reviewed, a regulation may end up changing as a result of another change. So from a past consultant who's represented people on these projects to having also managed these kinds of projects in the past, you have to remain involved through until the end. Can't stress it enough, to be quite honest. in terms of when the right time to actually speak, make your comments heard in order to communicate your interests to staff, we'd maintain that now is the time for people with an interest to make themselves aware to us, to submit their comments in writing with respect to their issues and or requests. As much as we've gone through a number of reviews internally already, there are errors in this document today. I'm aware of 6 of them as it stands right now, and I'm sure others are aware of more. Various blanks that we haven't filled, some overset text issues with the graphic design software we're using. So despite our best efforts in auditing and review, we aren't perfect. There may be some properties where the zoning that's applied and the zoning that exists doesn't necessarily line up. And with 50,000 properties to audit, we could really use the help of the public who have an interest in this project to verify the rules that do apply to them, to make the 10-minute phone call to us to have that discussion at some point over the next 9, 10, 11 months. Staff are also setting aside 3 days for individual meetings with stakeholders where there are larger issues that need to be addressed. We already have 2 such stakeholders who have reached out to staff in this regard. We'll be sending out information through our project mailing list, which is the best way to find out the most up-to-minute information as well without having to watch the website all the time. Those dates will likely be late spring and early summer. We'll likely hold them here, and if evening times are requested, we can make those available as well. Our consultation summaries from all these various outreach activities are proposed to come forward into the future staff reports that we would be bringing forward to Council, currently targeting early September for one of those. There may be a need for those sorts of comments at the statutory public meeting, and then of course addressing those final concerns in the final report covering the draft for adoption. We're intending to mirror the Livable Oakville process in this regard, bringing forward a summary of those comments, the summary of the staff response that is given to those. We need to complete a review of the special provisions right now, which is, and we're working full steam ahead on those. We are looking to schedule 2 future meetings of the in-zone subcommittee to discuss interim conclusions and recommendations, perhaps to get additional feedback from those members of the subcommittee. And why we're really trying to emphasize the need to contact us now is that we will be preparing an updated draft for the statutory round of consultation, an open house, and a statutory public meeting, not unlike the ones that you'll be experiencing tonight, just with a lot more properties in the fall. I guess the main takeaways that that staff is looking to deliver tonight is that there remain multiple opportunities for members of the public, for council to make contact with staff to discuss this bylaw and to make sure that the issues that are desired to be addressed do get addressed in a fashion that is appropriate. The easiest starting point would be to ensure that you are on our project mailing list. We can be contacted through either of the means shown on screen, or by contacting the town itself and asking to talk to somebody about the end zone project. Thank you for your time and attention, Your Worship. Members of council, staff are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nethery. Any questions, council? Well, I'll thank you, and I'll give you a bit of a rhetorical question. Will it be a satisfactory outcome if the newspaper headline is Oakville Planning Department seeks help of public? The answer is yes.
Through Your Worship,
From my
yes.
perspective, anyway. I thought the note you gave there, that we're looking for help from the public, is a really important note, and it's a really important part of the brand and the identity of the planning department that we've built together. And I was really happy to hear it. And I love the responsive consultation that your department is known for. So thank you very much for the report. I'll look for a motion to receive. Councillor Khan, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Nethery. All right. Public hearings. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, only 7 of them. And the first one is the public meeting. So all of these, if I don't make a mistake, all of these are, none of these are decision reports. These are all consultation items. And that means that we're here to hear the comments of the public. Planning will be taking the comments received from the public. Oh, wait, number 8 is a recommendation report. So except for that one, planning is looking for public comments, and we're taking them away and working to resolve the issues raised by the public comments, and as well as the issues noted in the report. And as I say, number 8 is an example of the process. We've already had that type of meeting for number 8, and now number 8 has come forward with a recommendation report. So we'll start off with number 7, and we're going to look to Paul Demchak, and take it away, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. Staff is in receipt of a zoning bylaw amendment application for the property located at 174 Lakeshore Road West, 91 and 87 Brookfield Road. The property is specifically located at the southeast corner of Lakeshore and Brookfield. It is comprised of 3 municipal properties. Currently on the site exists 3 single detached dwellings. To the east of the property and to the west are existing townhouse dwelling units. To the south are single detached units, and to the north are commercial land uses. The specific proposal is for a 4-story, 33-unit apartment building with 400 square meters of ground floor retail. To the further south of the property, to the east, I guess to the right on your screen, are 4 additional residential townhouse units. I've attached a few elevations. So this is the west elevation. This would be the concept plan looking from Brookfield Road. This is the north elevation looking from Lakeshore Road. The south elevation. And finally the east elevation. As well, this is a section showing the breakdown in terms of the uses proposed. So at the ground floor, you see the blue, which is the retail component proposed along Lakeshore. Above that would be the 3 floors of residential, and further to the south would be the townhouse units, as well as 2 floors of underground parking. In terms of the official plan, the Livable Oakville official plan designates the property as Central Business District. The Central Business District considers mixed-use developments within this designation, as well as permits a maximum of 4 stories. In terms of the zoning, the north 2 properties are zoned H2, R8, so there's a holding provision on the property, as well as special provision 625. 625 actually relates to an old zoning bylaw amendment application that allowed for 7 townhouse units on these northern 2 properties. The property to the south is zoned R04, and that allows for a single detached dwelling currently. A public information meeting was held on April 3rd, 2013. Approximately 34 residents came out to that meeting. Some of the issues that staff noted from this meeting include density, traffic and parking, grading and drainage of the site, potential shadowing, privacy and overlook impacts, as well as trees. In terms of the next steps, staff will be completing their analysis of the application and in the future bring forward a recommendation report to council. And tonight's recommendation is that comments from the public with respect to this application be received. Thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. There might be a couple. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I'm glad to see the various letters compiled for Council's review of this application. Before we go to members of the public, I was concerned, and I appreciate the fact that on page 174 you've indicated matters to be considered, and you've sort of itemized rather some of the points that people had raised through the first public information session. Just to clarify, when we look at the overlook and shadowing, is there going to be a shadow impact study required of the applicant? Like, I know you're looking into the issues. Mm-hmm. My concern is that we actually get a study with actual data to come back to review. Is that going to be completed?
Staff is still looking into, I guess, at the time of pre-consultation, we didn't flag that as an issue being at 4 stories. We are going to meet with the applicant, obviously subsequent to this meeting, and look at potentially looking into that shadowing study.
I would strongly suggest that that be pursued, given the fact that you've got such an overlook of the neighboring properties, and there's grading issue, which of course you've identified as well. The other question I had pertained to, in the context of the stormwater management report, does that deal with drainage concerns? Because I've met with residents who live in the townhouses to the east there, and there have been problems with drainage and the wall, the retention wall along there, retainer wall rather. And so that's another issue that I'd really make sure that is addressed through the context. Sorry, and finally, apologize. When you say traffic impacts, again, that will be a proper traffic impact study that they will, given the fact that we have, for lack of a better word, a dog's breakfast there in terms of Fortino's, the Brookfield, the Plaza, Maurice. You've got various entrances and exits. So traffic in the area is a big concern.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Demoff, and then Councillor Bird.
When you showed one of those cross-sections, the townhouses look like they're individual units. Are they townhouses, or are they there on the right-hand side there? It makes it look like there's units on each floor.
Right, so my understanding based on discussion with the applicant is that it would be 1 unit vertically for each unit.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to follow up, so that's 4 townhouses with 3 floors, 3
Correct.
residential floors, rather than 12, okay.
Yes,
thank
correct,
you.
yeah.
All right, Councillor Bird?
My question is, I guess the schematic on page 183, I think it's, you call it the roof, proposed roof plan. Though it's the first time that I can recall seeing, I'm assuming those blue things are solar panels?
I will let the applicant answer that in their presentation.
Sure,
in terms
we
of,
gotta, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
The applicant, that's the first time. I just wanted to know, now we're
Sure.
looking for things that, identifying if that's the general accepted symbol for solar panels. I thought it was an awning, quite frankly, but that's why I want to clarify that. Thank you.
yeah.
Maybe it's a bunch of chaise loungers. All right, any other questions from council? All right. And is the applicant here? And is the applicant ready to present? Well, then, come on down. It's your turn. Welcome. Council looks forward to your information. And I gather from these questions you've been given some indication as to things council's curious about.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is John Cowell. I'm an architect with the ARCOP group. And I have Paul Johnson here, who is our planner on this file. And I was going to show some of the slides which Mr. Demchak has shown you already, so I won't necessarily try and repeat that. But I will address questions, and I'm here to respond to any other issues that come up. One of the, as far as the solar panel issue is concerned, yes, but bearing in mind that this is a zoning application and the concept that's before you is a preliminary concept in sketch form, and everybody's thinking green these days, we would hope that rooftop solar panels are increasingly the order of the day, and if we get over the hurdles to the point where this goes into the site plan application stage and the detailed design stage, that's something that we would like to see happen. As far as the proposal itself is concerned, and perhaps I will take the benefit of some of the documents that we have prepared here, if I can, well, I don't know if I can operate your machine here, but the, where's your, I'm a Mac guy. This is... Sure. One of the challenges that I think we face here is trying to come up with a proposal which speaks to both the future of your official plan and the reality of today, what we find on the site. And to that extent, if you look at the context, we're on Lakeshore, facing what is essentially a Main Street's context. And over time, I would expect to see development of a form that you find further east, which is retail stores with apartments above, tight to the sidewalk. So that's what we wanted to propose along Lakeshore, and then turn the corner and gradually make a transition into a lower density form of residential development. And that's that staircasing effect in the townhouse component, which we would argue forms a kind of a transition between the Main Street's development along Lakeshore and the single-family homes to the south. The challenge is that to the east of us, we don't have Main Street's buildings. And so we have what is essentially a townhouse development at right angles to Lakeshore. And so the question is, do we design for that existing reality, which I suspect is perhaps 15, 20 years old or older, or do we design to the context of the official plan? And we've tried to do a little bit of both here, and I'm not sure that we're there yet, but we've built close to the street line on Lakeshore, and we've stepped back from the lot line to the east as the building moves to the south. And perhaps I can show that if I can just scroll through here. You see the blue retail stores, and there's the yellow indicating a stairwell at the end. That pretty well is tight to the east lot line. But as the building moves to the south, which in this case is to the right, the setback increases to 6 meters, which is basically the setback of the buildings to the east of us. So what they're giving us in the way of a setback, we're responding with a similar setback. But we have heard concerns about overlook and shadow and traffic, and of course we're here to hear those concerns, and then after tonight's meeting we'll be going away and trying to digest that and see how we can respond. So with that, I think I'm not going to go through all these slides again, but I'll answer any questions, and Mr. Johnson is here to perhaps speak to some of the planning issues. So,
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have questions? Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, and thank you very much for attending this evening. And I dare say you'll be hearing quite firmly from the residents in the area as to their opinions and views regarding the development. To that end, was there any consideration, because I know Councillor DeMoff and myself did not have any contact, say, with your firm regarding what was being proposed other than when we saw it was deemed a complete application. Were there any discussions with the immediate area residents in regards to their concerns or feedback regarding what they would or would not like to see developed on the site? In other words, was work done prior to submitting an application?
No, I think our understanding was that that's the process that we're engaged in now, and we hope to take this comments and consultation. We've had the open house. We're going to hear some more here tonight, and I'm sure we'll go away and see what we can do.
To that end, if we were able to arrange an appointment maybe with some of the residents who are representative of the residential association there, would you be agreeable to meeting with Councillor DeMoff and myself and discussing those a little bit more?
Absolutely, yeah, no
Excellent.
problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, perhaps I might ask a question. When you look at the immediate environment of the subject site, when you look east and west, there's a street pattern, there's a pattern to the streetscape, and I'm wondering why you want to break that pattern by creating this island of high intensity in that otherwise lower intensity streetscape. Either one of you want to give us some feedback on that?
Well, it it goes to the point I was trying to raise, whether or not you're designing for the past or the future or the present. I mean, we have a context and it's real, and we're going to have to respond to that, and I understand that. But I dare say that the kind of development that you're referring to, where you have townhouses that were basically built in the backyards of other houses, and if you look back, maybe I can take you back to that diagram, the aerial photo. What you have on the first block to the east of us is a row of street-facing houses, and then you've got another row of houses in what almost certainly in the past were backyards for houses similar to the ones that are on Brookfield. And you've got a context where you're at the intersection of what is going to be someday your main street, your main downtown street. It is already. And so we're trying to say, all right, our client wants to redevelop it. Should they be replicating the form that we find next door, which really doesn't conform with your long-term vision for a kind of Oakville Main Streets concept, or should we anticipate that? And we're trying to find some balance where we respect the reality of the context that's there, but we sort of building for the future. I don't know if that's...
If I could just add, Your Worship, the lands, as you may know from the staff report, are designated central business district in the official plan. And very specific provision is made there for height and use and design. And if I might say, this proposal exactly responds to those requirements in that it's within the height limitation. It has all the uses that are called for. It has the mix of uses. It organizes parking and other elements in the way that we think the official plan calls for. So we understand that there are going to be questions and concerns about traffic and storm drainage and these other detailed matters. And of course, that's why the applicant has had us put together 5 technical studies that were submitted in support of the application and are on the town's website, and any members of the public are free to look at those, and those are out for review right now with town staff. But in terms of the essence of the project, it flows from the official plan.
Okay, so I should understand then that you're less concerned about fitting into the present than fitting into one of the possible futures under the official plan.
Yes, sir, there's a plan context, obviously, for the area. The official plan speaks to that in terms of density, in terms of use, and we think that this is responsive to that. Those
Okay, thank you. I have a question for you from Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just supplemental to that, the central business designation is for which portion of the property? Because you've had a land assembly take place of 3 different properties. So which one is supposed to be the central business district, 4-story height limit?
It applies to the entire property, Councillor.
The entire property?
Yes, it does. I think if you look at the staff report, you'll see that that's the case. I'm just looking for the page reference. Page 6 of the staff report, Councillor, identifies the property outlined in black. And so the western limit of the central business district is at Brookfield Road, and the southern limit is at the southern limit of the subject property.
I guess what I was getting at was a previous zoning bylaw amendment application was approved on a portion of the site to permit the development of 7 townhouse units. That's considerably different than what you're proposing now, correct?
Yes, indeed.
The graphical depiction of what he said previously is maybe best shown on page 170 of the agenda and the color plate there. All right, any other questions, Council? Thank you. Then thank you very much for your information.
Thank you. Happy to answer any questions at the end if that's all.
All righty. Madam Clerk, I understand there's a delegation or two listed. Would you call the first delegation, please?
Yes, the first delegation is Mr. Mike Stevens.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Your Worship. Good evening, councillors. My name is Mike Stevens. I live at 44 Brookfield Road in the heart of this area. I've lived in Oakville with my family for 36 years, and we have lived on Brookfield for almost 20 years. And we represent, I'm representing the area tonight, plus all the people who are from the Brookfield area here in the audience this evening, but we've tried to consolidate. Can I ask for the clock to go back, please? I haven't started yet.
I beg your pardon?
I'm sorry, the clock is ticking and I'm just introducing myself. Could I start the presentation with the 10 minutes full on the clock?
You'll find that in Committee of the Whole, we're quite lenient, so don't worry about that.
I'm sure.
But you would do everyone a favor if you could try to speak toward the microphone.
Right.
And please be at ease and don't fret. We're happy to have your information, and we're always impressed when people take the trouble to speak through one person instead of everybody saying the same thing. So
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I've put up to be the most livable town in Canada, which I think is a wonderful vision. We believe it's a great vision for Canada, for Oakville, sorry. However, the Brookfield neighbourhood is one step ahead of you because we already are the most livable neighbourhood in Oakville. We're very proud of this neighbourhood, and it's a very unique neighbourhood. I'd like to show you why. Community is totally unique. It differs from every other area in the designated central business plan. Every other area, this one is unique. Why is it unique? If you look at the blue line at the top, that's Lakeshore Road, obviously. The bottom, the white, is Lake Ontario. So we have two very distinct boundaries, north and south of this area. We also have, we're basically a landlocked area. We also have 3 cul-de-sacs that border the Brookfield Road. Brookfield Road itself is a cul-de-sac. Lakewood is a cul-de-sac, and Brookfield Crescent is a cul-de-sac. And everyone on those 3 cul-de-sacs has to exit onto Lakeshore via Brookfield. So you can see that in itself is indicative of an area which differs in a number of ways, both geographically, the cul-de-sacs, and as we've heard before, it is 100% residential. There is no commercial in this area, there's no retail in this area, and it consists of nothing above 2 stories in height. We've got single-story detached homes, we have 2-story detached homes, and we have 2-story townhomes. There is nothing else in this area that would suggest anything above the tree line. Brock Street, I'm going to quickly go through these photographs. Brock Street looking south, the townhomes and 2 residences. Brookfield Road, Lake, looking down Brookfield Crescent, looking north on Brookfield Road, one of the properties, looking east on Burnett, looking west on Lakewood, looking south on Lakewood, looking north on Brookfield, South Brookfield. All the trees beyond the white car parked on the east side of Brookfield there would all be coming down as part of the plan, that is the proposal that's been put forward. This is the north side of Lakeshore Road, and as you can see with Fortino's there, Meineke, other work-live buildings closer to Kerr Street, and then you go on down to the Kensington and the tower blocks 111 Forsyth and the other ones in that location on Forsyth. If you look on the south side of Lakeshore Road, this separate, distinct unity with Lakeshore providing the board there, there's a couple of particular things that I'd like you to note. One is that all the trees on the right-hand side, as part of this proposal, would disappear. They're gone. Secondly, if you look down the left-hand side, the fire hydrant, just beyond the fire hydrant, Kathy was referring to that earlier, that is the exit entrance for Fortino's. And when Loblaws first acquired that site, that entrance was okayed by council on the understanding that traffic would be diverted from Fortino's exit and west onto Lakeshore Road. And there are signs there to suggest that's where the traffic should go. However, if you can imagine what is happening, residents for Brookfield and the other areas are coming west on Lakeshore Road. They get into the centre lane, and someone pulls out from Fortino's and turns east. And that is happening all the time. So if you've got traffic building up in the westbound lane for the stoplights on Maurice, someone coming on the middle lane to turn left into Brookfield is suddenly faced by someone being let out of Fortino's and turning east. This intersection, we would suggest, is probably one of the most dangerous intersections in the downtown area. So it's very unique, this area. We feel very passionately about it. No retail, no commercial, no sidewalks. The only sidewalk is on the west side of Brock Street. It's a very relaxed environment, very stable environment, multiple age groups. And the skyline is dominated by multiple trees. Above tree line, there are no buildings visible anywhere in the neighborhood. So you can't see Fortino's, you can't see 111, you can't see any other area. The proposal itself, although the developer called it a 4-story building, it is actually 5.5 stories. The blue area on the top that was noted is a workout area or amenity. And if you take the total height, the 15 meters which goes up to the flat roof, and then the amenities, and then the shaft for the elevator, the height of this building is 70 feet. And we've got nothing in this area beyond the 2-story buildings I've already mentioned. The arborist report indicates that 16 Lakeshore Road trees would have to come down. Those are city-owned, town-owned trees. 26 private trees would have to come down. And 1 tree would be so badly damaged, not on the property, but on a neighbouring property, that would have to come down as well. I didn't want to mention defence lands or Dorval, but I can't resist the temptation because 43 trees, further trees in this area, are coming down. The building would dominate the skyline. It would be a massive, overbearing eyesore for all of us residents. Dramatically changing the Brookfield neighbourhood. Additionally, as I've indicated, it would add to an already dangerous intersection, increase traffic congestion, which is already a problem, create additional parking issues and environmental issues, noise, lights, air, etc. Let me look at the retail that's proposed in this development. It's 400 square metres that's on there. Take you back to 101 retailing. There's 2 key elements. One is a high level of pedestrian traffic. The other one is a convenient, close parking. The proposed retail in this building has neither. There is no consistent pedestrian traffic, and there's certainly no parking close. So without these 2, the retail is destined to be a failure. The retail experience on Lakeshore Road to date over the last 2 or 3 years, within 2 blocks of the neighbourhood area, there are already 49 stores and services. You want pizza, we can give you 3 different stores. You want coffees, we can give you 6 dozen. You want dry cleaning, you want upholstery. We've got 49 stores within 2 blocks walk of this area. The 3 work-live retail that were developed on both the south side and the north side of Lakeshore Road were built. I'm talking about the one that's on the southeast corner of Kerr and Lakeshore, talking about the one on the south side of Lakeshore, west of Kerr, and the one on the north side of Lakeshore, west of Kerr. None of those three work-live retail units were built on residential land. They were already, i.e. McDonald's was there on the south side, and the other ones were all commercial land before the town put in the work-live retail. A total of 29 retail-live units are in that area, 10 on the southeast, 10 on the southwest, and 9 on the northwest. A very small core of these retailers have succeeded. However, at least 70 retailers have tried and failed in those 29 work-live units. Some units have rotated 4 owners who've tried businesses in the last 3 years alone, 2 to 3 years. So retail in this area, A, we've got enough, and B, the sort of retail that sits on the sidewalk with no pedestrian traffic and little or no parking is destined to fail. And I'm just going to run through what we have right now on Lakeshore Road in livable Oakville. Corner of Kerr Street and Lakeshore, northwest side of Lakeshore. Same. This is on the south side of just east of Kerr Street. Was a tile store until a week and a half ago, and it closed. You got 2 stores here. Way Cool Tattoos, been there, closed, boarded up. Lakeshore Road, boarded up. This one was a recent store that closed and now gone. Windermere Manor, that will be gone in a couple of weeks. It's the showroom for the Windermere Manor. They only have 5 units left, so that is another one's going to close, and we'll have the same picture again. And this one is just further east on Lakeshore Road. This one moved off the north side of Lakeshore Road and moved into the plaza that is anchored by Starbucks, Harvey's, and the Ben and Florentines on the south side. So the retail experience to date on Lakeshore is not good, to say the least. Currently, 8 are closed or boarded up, including 2 at the busiest intersection in this area. So if you can't get traffic and shopping on the busiest intersection, what chance and why would one want to have it? You don't have pedestrian traffic and you have very, very limited parking. Planned retail to us is a lose-lose situation. If somehow it were to succeed, highly unlikely, but there's no parking and you're going to add to congestion. Assuming it fails, it's just going to be a boarded up set of stores at the end of a 100% residential area. And that's a blight on what is already, we believe, the most livable neighborhood in Oakville. This is the final slide. We believe that the Central Business District Plan was conceived we know it was conceived after many years of hard and dedicated work by council members, all sorts of experts, and residents ourselves. As I say, it was developed over a number of years before it eventually came to print in 2011. And it was based on the best estimates as we as a community saw it at that time. However, we now have a track record of small business on Lakeshore. Surely now is the time to sit back and say, okay, it looked good at the time, now let's learn from our mistakes and let's make sure we don't make the same mistakes again. Brookfield is periphery on the central plan. It's at the southwesternmost tip. And it actually has enormous intensification there already, because we have the townhouses on Brock Street, on the west side of Brock Street, and we have 2-story rented townhouses on the west side of Oakville. So the idea is, as per the proposal, to jump retail over Brock Street, dump it down at the end of Brookfield, and then move back into residential property. We already have those 2 intense properties there at the moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, Your Worship, based on the above and other residents' concerns, we strongly believe that this proposal should be rejected outright.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions? Councillor Dudley.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation and all your work that you did in compiling the information. We listened to the applicant in regards to what they had, what shall I say, planned for the future versus today. And we've sort of heard through this things, and I appreciate your point regarding the live-work. Yes, we should be learning by our mistakes. What do you, in your opinion, see as a good fit on that property in terms of recognizing that we have to do a certain amount of intensification? We wouldn't be looking at probably a single dwelling home, but what would be something that you feel would be agreeable or compatible to the area?
Good question, Councillor. I think the consensus, I suggest two things. One, first of all, I think you should listen to, obviously as you are, the remaining presentations, which are an important part and cover many of the other areas like density and traffic and the townhomes and shadow, etc. So many of those issues are covered. I think our viewpoint would be this. Once the developer has been made aware of all the concerns that we currently have with the proposal for this area, clearly if he comes back with a proposal that encompasses all the concerns that we have regarding, as a result of all the presentations, then I think it would be upon us to look at that proposal. But I think, first of all, it would have to meet all the criteria, because any development there should be based on the criteria that we're covering and presenting here tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Ms. Annika Faber-Lee.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council, and neighbors. My name is Annika Faberway. I'm an owner and resident at 98 Brock Street, and I'm here representing the owners and residents of the Halton Condominium Corporation, number 106. There are none in Oakville who would be as negatively impacted by the proposed development as the owners in our townhouse complex. And I can tell you without hesitation that all of us are 100% against every aspect of this proposed development. Our units are on the east border. A number of our concerns have been already identified by Mr. Demick and Mr. Stevens, but I'd like to take a few minutes to present from our perspective. So I'm going to touch on proposed development transition, tree protection, drainage, pollution, increased density, reduced property value, and privacy. So first of all, the transition to the east side of the property. Well, there isn't any. The midpoint of the property on the proposed development is 1.8 meters above the 98 Brock Street townhouses. This results in what the proposed builder would be calling a 4-story building, having the impression of a 5 to 6-story building. Because of the grading, you'll see that later as well in an image. Right beside our townhouses. The impact of the shadow from the proposed building would result in virtually no sun on the western face of our homes through the winter, with minimal sun through the summer. In regards to official studies, you're welcome to use my home and living room to see that sun. But from what we are able to determine, there were no shadow studies done for the east side. In the plans that were presented, there were some shadow images from all the other directions on the proposed building, but clearly none from our perspective, which is no surprise given the serious negative impact on our properties. There's no sun equals no ability to maintain our existing gardens, nor would there be any chance for the proposed garden in the development plans to succeed. The development image currently suggests planting of trees in a little piece that I think was identified as mirroring our setback, but those trees are to be planted on top of the underground garage, so I would question, one, without the sun, how they're going to grow, and two, where the root structure would be headed. Further, there's no height transition on the east or north of the proposed development, as per our town requirements. Additionally, the proposal has the building right along the lot line in the northeast corner, and I'll show an image of that shortly. One of the obvious questions would be, how would they care for any building on that east-facing side, or care for the wall on the east side of that building if they have to come into our property, which would be trespassing to care for their building. So this is one image that shows, this is actually taken from the second floor at Fortino's. You can see here what I'm going to, moving forward, refer to as the valley. So it shows the grading coming down on the right from the house that's currently on the property. And in fact, you can see the little black line that I've identified right here. That's the bottom of the property, and then here you're coming up to the midpoint. And then if you have the new proposed building coming right up, there's 0 setback at the front and 0 setback right here. This would be your new view from Fortino's. You can add some pictures and a brick wall, but that's what the view would be. This is a little closer now to our property. So the image shows a blue arrow, and this arrow is pointing to a black line. The black line here identifies where the wall is coming up to. Again, there's 0 setback, so it would be right along here. There's a setback here to mirror our setback, but this is where the building would be. And if you can just imagine that black line now going up 5 to 6 stories from our perspective in the valley. The other aspect to consider, the proposed plan suggests or is asking for a change from 35% coverage for the building area on the lot. The new building would be over 50%. That doesn't actually, so one, it's already 50% of the land covered in building, but further to that, it doesn't actually include any of the paved areas. So the driveway that would be coming down towards our townhouses, or the new paved backyards for the townhouses there. The other aspect is the change in the height from the 7 townhouse 2-story element to becoming a fourth floor building. So tree protection, tree number 30 on our property is not adequately protected in the plans. Additionally, there are 2 trees missing from the plans, one of 3.3 meter diameter on our property line, and secondly, an oak tree that was actually planted by the town when the last renovations were done. They had raised the ground against zoning rules and actually smothered the 5 trees that were along our border. All of those trees had been of a 2-foot diameter, all gone now. One of the oak trees replanted by the town has lived, and of course we'd like to see this tree continue its good health. So a couple of things to note from this image. It's just a different perspective showing the grading from Brookfield at the far side where the white fence is, and then coming to the foreground from our side. And also in the middle here, this is the tree that is right along the fence line that if there's a brick building right beside that, cannot survive. This is just to show what could have happened or what has happened from the drainage. So on the right-hand side is the middle property of the 3, and as you can see, the grounds were raised, but through drainage coming over the side, this wooden fence is no longer surviving particularly well. This is where the water used to run naturally through and is now, continues to run through there naturally down the block as well, but of course is now also facing extra drainage issues coming over the driveway and not doing so well on this fence line. We are concerned that if this also gets raised, where does the drainage go? And as you can see from the slope, whereabouts the new driveway would be, that just heads straight down into our backyards. Pollution. First issue of pollution would be the increased pavement would result in an urban heat island. All the heat would be trapped in the valley, made up of the proposed driveway and the new townhouse patios. Secondly, the 87-car parking lot under the condo apartment building would result in increased noise pollution, which would be funneled and amplified, trapped between the buildings and again in the valley. And what about the increased traffic that would have to serve the retail spaces? Where would the delivery trucks be to drop off goods to the proposed retail? This has a direct impact on Brookfield and Lakeshore, with the added noise pollution affecting the Brock Street residents. The air quality also becomes an issue, again with the buildings on either side and the increased car traffic, the increase in smog, again in our backyards on Brock Street. And finally, with the increased population and traffic, there's also likely an increase in litter pollution, which will likely roll down the slopes and the grading, again, to our backyards in the valley. The increased population also presents a concern. So currently zoning allows for 18 residents, and the proposed development is looking for an increase to a minimum of 112 residents in that area. I was obviously thinking, 87 employees. Those are the ones in the retail. So they would also be in the area, and of course their cars would be impacting the traffic and increase in density there as well. This number is not suited to the location. It's not suited to our neighborhood, as Mr. Stevens so well described earlier. There's no sidewalks, current bus route right behind the corner there. The numbers do not match our neighborhood. Mayor Burton, as you pointed out from a skyscape across here, this is from the corner at Brock and Lakeshore on the north side. You can see all along the south side, that's looking to the east on the left-hand side, and to the west on the right-hand side. There is no building taller than Harvey's and our townhouses on this corner here. And that includes looking all the way to the home live-work buildings to the east. The property value decreases as a part of this. By being adjacent to a property not in line with the surroundings, you create an atmosphere of discomfort in a place that people do not want to be buying their townhouses, where they've got this monster beside them. Finally, privacy concerns. This actually impacts all of us greatly in 98 Brock Street, and in fact results in a lifestyle change. Our privacy would be completely annihilated, with neighbors in the proposed development having the ability to easily see into our space, not to mention each car coming down the driveway of the proposed development. The use of our outdoor space would have to change to adapt to the pollution issues and the complete lack of sunlight touching our gardens and patios. Our indoor living would also change. The diminished sunlight coming into our homes would impact our heating bills. The types of plants we grow indoors would have to change due to different levels of light, and we could no longer walk around in our homes without considering peering eyes that would be able to see directly into our private lives. To finish, I think it's pretty clear that we at 98 Brock Street are vehemently opposed to this proposed development. There is nothing about it that matches either our definition or yours of livable Oakville for this neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your information. You've elicited at least one question from Councillor Adams, if you could.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Could you help us understand the history of your townhome? I don't know whether you're involved in the condo board directly or not, but you showed some slides of the backyards of the ones that face backwards onto the site, and I was looking at some of the pictures for the south end, and it looks like the setbacks are very small. Do you know the history of how that came to be?
I don't know the history, no. Okay. I know that I really wouldn't say if I'd just be telling stories if I said what I know.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. Maybe our staff at a later point could help us understand how the local scene came to be. Thank you very much.
I'm sure they've taken note.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Thank you very much for bringing your information to council.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Mr. Joe Brandolino.
Welcome, Mr. Brandolino. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Joe Brandolino. I live on 51 Brookfield Road, which is just south of the development. My presentation, I guess, encompasses a lot of what the previous two presentations have, but concentrating more on the density and what the effect of the density would, or the proposed density of this development and how it would affect our area. Some of the things I want to touch on is just the reaction to the proposal, and I talked to a lot of the residents in our area, and I think that it's interesting that this one has raised the hackles of a lot of people. There's issues with the zoning bylaw I'd like addressed, and part of it's been done tonight and brought up by the previous two speakers, and also some perceived problems with the proposed density and what it's going to do. And in summary, I was going to shamelessly get on my knees and beg you to stop this thing, but we'll use different methods maybe. So the reaction has been vehement from most of the residents, and it's not just NIMBYism. I think a lot of people are looking or understand that there has to be development, but this one is just so out of character with the neighborhood and the way that the neighborhood should be developed, in our opinion. And the sense is that there's this huge development. As pretty as it might be when it's done, it's just massive, and it's in a small spot, a small space, and it's in a neighborhood that has nothing like it. It would be an eyesore, no matter how well architected it would be. So I'm going to go through issues with the zoning bylaw. Some of the facts I have in my table here may be slightly off, but it won't change the spirit of what I'm trying to get to. If you look at the properties involved here, the way I understand it, and I may have misinterpreted some of the issues, but 174 Lakeshore and 91 Brookfield are R8 or modified R8 zoning, and I thought 87 Brookfield was a pure residential R04. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but I could be wrong. So what I've done here, just to contrast what's going to happen with the proposed amendments here, I think they want all three properties to go to C3R zoning, and just for reference, it's 0.2845 hectares, and that'll come into play with for the density. The present units that I have here, that I've done here, this is what could be possible under the present zoning. So you can, on 174 Lakeshore, 91 Brookfield, you can have 7 townhomes, as Kathy had mentioned previously, and 1 home on 87 Brookfield, the way I understand it. On the new proposal, as we all know, is 400 square meters of retail and 33 apartments on the first 2 sites, and 4 townhomes on the third. Well, if you do the math, it works out that we're going to end up with 28 units per hectare if you use the present zoning, and you'll end up with 130 units per hectare under their proposed amendments. That just sounds like a massive jump on one aspect of the whole zoning process. That's just one aspect. Another one would be height. Right now, they're kind of limited to 9 meters under this zoning, and they want to go to 15 meters. And I think it's been said by the previous 2 speakers, in some spots, it could be perceived as a 21 meter or 18 meter, and I'll show that in another slide I have. So really what we're looking at is a proposal for 360% density increase in the way us lay people look at it, and the prospect of 50 plus more people. And I use this very conservative estimate with 33 apartments or condo units and 4 townhomes. It'll be a lot more than that, I would think. But even if you look at it, 50 more cars trying to negotiate that little sliver of land, because Brookfield has no sidewalks there. There's always parking on the west side because of the other townhomes. And it's just a very difficult place to negotiate, and I will address that as well. They're also looking for a 130% increase in height, and that's very uncharacteristic of our neighborhood. And I think it was very eloquently stated by Annika that this would cause a lot of trouble for their unit in particular. But what Mr. Stevens was saying earlier is also true, that right now when we walk through our neighborhood, we see nothing but trees. Thank you very much. It's a great way to live. And the zero setback is also a big problem. And the issue of replanting trees or having proper drainage is a problem. So I'll just go through a few perceived issues I see with the proposal. And just to put it in perspective, along here would be 98 Brock, or the other townhomes that Annika was talking about. And you can see that there is zero setback. All along here, there's about 18 meters of zero setback, 0 on Lakeshore, 0 on Brookfield. So it's just this big mass. And I understand that there's probably some merit to the actual design in terms of the design, but where it's at is where we're having an issue with. One of the problems, and it's been stated twice already, there's only a very small area that's 6 meters by probably 20 meters, I guess, or in that range, that would be able to take some additional trees or replanting of trees, and we question the viability of those trees for what's been stated. And everything else is just paved And it's a difficult issue for line of sight. I used the wrong elevation here, but the spirit of this slide is still intact. What I've done is looked at just the appropriate relative heights here. So the existing, what I've done here is taken away the townhomes, and this is Brock Street at the bottom here, and I put an approximate 5'11" individual standing there, just to put it in perspective. All of the stated heights in the proposal would be referenced to Brookfield Road. So that's 0 meters, but Brock is 1.8 meters below in grade, and approximately that's where the backyards are. So they want, if you think about what they will be looking at, even though this spot, I agree, would have a 6-meter setback. I haven't shown that here, but at the same time, it's just so bloody close to these people. And it is a big problem for them in particular, and for the rest of us, just for the height issues. So explanation on why we said 21 meters. It does say that with the elevator penthouse, it would be at 21 meters, and this is to scale here. And we're assuming that the amenity area, which they're asking for 25% of the full roof area, that will be at least 18 meters to make it viable, I would think. 3 meters for a room, more or less. So another one of the problems we see is traffic. And let me explain how this is organized. This is Lakeshore Road, as it says, and this is Brookfield, and the A would be approximately where the development is proposed to be. We have traffic light on Maurice and Lakeshore, and at Brock and Lakeshore. That often in the morning, I don't know if any of you live close by or drive by, this black arrow here, it's very congested. This is the driveway into Loblaws. There's kids walking to school at St. Thomas Aquinas, and there's school buses, and there's people that use Lakeshore in lieu of QEW. It's really quite a problem. Now, we're all suffering with that. We're not saying that that's unique, but it's unique because we have this kind of congested area. Plus, the problem that if you have 50, 60, 70 more people trying to get out in the morning, and I know it won't be all at once, and there's statistics, et cetera, that you could apply to this, but we also have dead ends, as Mr. Stevens was saying, at both Brookfield and Lakewood and Brookfield Crescent. They normally would go up Brookfield, but I think that this would cause a loop where people would congest all the neighboring arterial roads and cause a lot more traffic. And again, remember, there are a lot of kids and a lot of elderly people in our neighborhood, and there are no sidewalks, and right now it's kind of relaxed, has been described, and we have a kind of an issue with this kind of increased frenetic existence. It doesn't make sense. The other thing is precedent, and I know that we have a very fair council and mayor, and every development is looked on its individual merits. But if we look at our area within 2 or 3 blocks, we have an enormous amount of what can I call it, low-lying fruit or low-hanging fruit for developers, because a lot of these properties, although they are, I'm not saying that any of these are under development, but a lot of these are, I guess, properties that are very large pieces of land or decent pieces of land with older buildings on them. So they're just prime and ripe for development. And we're really worried about proposals going through that increase the density. If I was a businessman and I bought one of these other properties and I wanted something similar to what existed across the street or 1 block away, I think I would put up a fairly decent fight on that. And we're just worried about these sort of issues. And especially for the fact that there's already townhouses at the end of our street, right across, that's the red townhouses at the bottom here. And it's a fairly big property, and we're just, again, worried about it. In summary, we're worried about the whole mass of this property proposal, and there's no setbacks, there's traffic issues, pedestrian safety. Many residents will be left completely in the dark, and the trees will be removed and in no way to replant them. Anyway, it's undesirable, and I'm not going to beg anymore. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Liddy Hobbs.
Who's the next?
Good evening.
Just before you begin, Mr. Hab, Mr. Bailey, are you, so good, you're in good position because you're next. I was just going to try and do a little stage managing here. And so if you're a delegation tonight, if you could move towards the center, then you'd be better. You wouldn't be as inconvenienced as Mr. Hab was by our layout here. So thank you for coming. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much. I will be brief. I think most of what has been said by the three eloquent speakers behind really has focused on how many of us feel in that area. My name is Liddy Hobbs. I live at 207 Lakewood Drive. I'm a relative new resident of Oakville. I've been here only since 1974. My wife, however, was born on Holyrood Avenue, so we've lived in this area for quite a long time. And she, I believe, is going to be 60 very soon, and she's lived all her life in Oakville. So we are long Oakville residents. When I've been listening to the proposals here and also to some of the ideas from Livable Oakville, there's one thing that I have a concern with future developments, including this one here. On April 3rd, I attended a meeting where the proposed development, I guess, was shown. And I think someone mentioned before that 34 residents were at that meeting. That represents a very small number. Now, why did a very small number attend? Because we have not been given information about this particular proposal. The only reason I'm here today, and the only reason I attended the April 3rd meeting, is I had a direct email from my Ward 2 councillor, and I thank her very much for that. I live on Lakewood Drive, and I have to use the exact same access to Lakeshore Road. When I attended the meeting on April 3rd, I asked one of the town people there why we were not apprised of this particular development, this particular idea. And I was told because legally we only are supposed to give you a letter if you are within 100 meters of a proposed development. I suppose I'm not within 100 meters. Neither is most of Lakewood. So what basically happened was that this particular person said, well, don't worry about it because now you're here, you can put your name down and you'll get things in the future. But what about all the other residents that did not receive any information? And by looking at the residents here, I would put to you that probably there would be 4 times as many here if they had received this information. I would like to propose that in the future, that town staff and Oakville Council look into the idea of giving people in a residential area that are more than 100 meters away of any proposed development an official letter, and I propose that it would be closer to 400 or 500 meters, because 100 meters is completely unrealistic. We are all part of the same road. I live on a cul-de-sac, I live on a dead-end street, and many of us are not here because we basically did not know about this development. Some people say, well, don't you drive by this place all the time? Then you see the sign. Well, as was, I think, as Mr. Bardolino stated, many of us can't get onto Lakeshore Road, so we take the back streets and we take Burnett, and we do not see these things. So any letter coming from town staff regarding any future developments such as this would be very much appreciated, and I think you would find many more residents here willing to participate in the democratic process. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Okay.
Madam Clerk, well, we've already pretty much announced him. Paul Bailey. Welcome, Paul. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm the president of the SCORA Residents Association. We have 170 members, mostly to the west of this property. I guess my comments here will probably be more sort of from a sort of a big picture point of view, but I mean, a lot of the good comments that have been made before, I'll touch on a few of them, but basically our SCORA's main opposition to this proposal is, I guess, related to generally overbuilding the site. We don't think the proposal's in keeping with the neighboring properties or the optimal development of Lakeshore west of Kerr Street. We see 37 new units going in where there are previously 3. That's a 12 times increase, or multiple of 12. We see shadowing as an issue, especially for the condos directly to the east. Some of those properties in the wintertime, when the sun's low in the sky, they're not going to see the sun after 4 o'clock. And that's, to me, unacceptable. That could be 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening in the summertime. That's not fair. We see crowding as an issue for the adjacent property to the east as well, towering over, and they're basically going to be living in an alley with an alley existing behind their property. The live-work units has already been touched on. I kind of agree with what's been said already. The building height issue, when I saw that it could go up to 70 feet above Lakeshore, including the penthouse for the elevator, I thought to myself, this is just going to stand out for decades from now, and I guess that's an issue. I guess in terms of the streetscape generally, we've got a couple of properties nearby that could be redeveloped in the not so far future, especially to the west, those townhomes, the white ones. And just looking at, I realize there are a few doctors in Toronto, I believe, that own that property, but I don't know them personally, but I believe at some point that property may be sold to a developer and developed on a large scale, and that could be a $100 million project. That's a big property there. There's currently 15 other projects underway within a 1.2 kilometer range, totaling about $589 million. There's a lot of development going on in this area, but this particular one stands out. It does not mesh with what's going on around it. To the south, to the east, to the west, it doesn't really mesh with the area. I guess the drainage issues are also a concern. It's a natural sort of gully there, and we'd like to see that intact and maintained the way it is. The mature trees, there hasn't been a whole lot of talk of trees, and I know there's not a lot of ability of council to deny an application based on losing trees, but basically every tree on this property is going to be leveled, and including the ones that are on the municipal property bordering Lakeshore. And that, to us, is, I guess, a problem, because this is really the last stand of trees, a significant stand of trees. This is like one of 2 or 3 that exist between St. Jude Cemetery and Allen Street. And if we're just going to get rid of all the trees in the sort of downtown stretch of Lakeshore, we're going to be looking more like Port Credit or Etobicoke or something. I guess the other problem is that they're not leaving any space whatsoever for trees to actually grow to any significant height, for root systems to develop. You're not going to get 40, 50-foot trees out of these sort of planted, for lack of a better term, tree coffins that where you've got like 4 feet squared kind of thing. I realize the town's recently changed some of their planting regulations, and I understand that, but from 15 cubic meters to 30 cubic meters, but things are, these trees are not going to have a real chance to grow to what the neighboring areas or neighboring properties trees are at. Privacy has already been touched on. Loss of reasonable expected privacy to the condos on Brock Street. I think that's just unfair, period. Street parking, it's already been touched on. There's nothing on Lakeshore. There's a bike lane going through there. That should be maintained. If people want street level parking, to go to Burnett or Brock or to Brookfield, you're going to run into traffic issues and just safety issues generally. There's no, with the exception of Brock Street, there are no sidewalks, and Lakeshore, of course. Traffic, the additional residences and associated vehicles and all the day trips, morning trips, afternoon trips, evening trips, all the stuff that's associated with that, and the intersection of Brookfield and Lakeshore, that's all important stuff. I guess, in terms of commercial zone, the commercial zoning which is currently on that property, I guess just because a property has been zoned at some point in the past as commercial doesn't necessarily mean it has to be developed to that potential. Infill development, most people are realistic and realize that there has to be some intensification, even on properties like these. These are small properties, but I guess that could probably be done in a more reasonable manner than going to this extreme. It's our feeling that the current zoning is more than sufficient for infill development proposals, and that you'd be able to defend that at the OMB. We recommend that the town deny the zoning application and ask that the property owner return to council with a proposal that sort of meets the existing zoning for the property. We ask that the town supports redevelopment more fitting with the surrounding properties, the character of the area, and look for options that are still intensifying but are more maintaining the character of the area. We ask that all trees on the municipal lands be protected. We've lost a lot of trees in this area of Oakville. I mean, literally, between the 15 developments, I'm guessing upwards of 1,000 trees. That's a lot of canopy gone. And I realize that they're planting new trees, and there are sort of formulas in place for replacing trees, but a tree isn't always equal to a tree, kind of thing. And some of the space that they give for these tree systems, or the root systems, just aren't sufficient. And I guess finally, we'd like to see the maintenance and preservation of that drainage basin between the Brookfield and the Brock Street residences, and that pretty much sums up my statement.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive list. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Andrew Taylor.
Mr. Taylor? Mr. Taylor, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Council, and Your Honour. I bring actually nothing new to the table that you haven't already heard this evening from the various parties that are here. I live at 150 Burnett Street. I think I'm the only representative on Burnett Street at this particular moment. The whole proposal is really not suitable for the area that we're in. I live right at the corner of Burnett and Brock, at the top of the little rise. If people can't get out from Brookfield onto Lakeshore, they will come down the little hill on Burnett. They speed down and go around the corner onto Brock Street. I can see potentials of accidents taking place there with people exiting from the park. Lots of kids are starting to use that park there. So I feel personally that the whole proposal should be brought back to council with more in keeping for what the neighbourhood deserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your information. Are there any other delegations listed? Are there any other members of the public with new information, additional information for council on this matter? Thank you. Councillor Duddick? We're out of delegations. A motion to receive would be welcome.
Thank you. Motion to receive.
Thank you. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. That is public hearing item number 1, item number 7 on the agenda. Now, how about a 2-minute recess to permit the orderly evacuation of the chamber? We will resume at the call of the chair momentarily. Okay, let's raise our chair backs and seat tables to their upright stowed position and prepare to push back from the gate. And we'll resume this flight. That was sort of your 2-minute warning. And all right, this meeting of the Planning and Development Council is now back in session. And we are turning to Paul Demchak again for the recommendation report for the second public hearing, item 8 on the agenda. Paul, we're all ears.
Got it. Mayor Burton, members of council, staff has received a zoning bylaw amendment application for the property located at 2420 8th Line. My presentation includes both a public meeting and recommendation report. So the existing site is located at 2420 8th Line. Existing on the site, well, it's now been demolished. It's an old, it's an agriculturally zoned property, but it had a site-specific bylaw on the property to allow for an artist studio within the existing detached dwelling. Basically, it was the last dwelling within this neighborhood that was not developed with the original subdivision. And just in addition to that, in terms of information, there's a vacant lot at the rear of this property located on Nichols Drive, which is as well owned by the current owner. In terms of the concept plan, the applicant is proposing to zone the lands to basically be consistent with the existing subdivision in terms of the R12 and R5 zoning categories. This is just the concept plan in terms of what's being proposed on Nichols Drive being one detached dwelling, and on 8th Line, the second detached dwelling. In addition to this, the applicant has submitted a consent application to move the lot line to be consistent with the existing subdivision, as well as a site plan application would be required as part of that consent application. So this would be before committee as well in the future. In terms of the official plan, the site is designated as low-density residential. The zoning, as is mentioned, had that site-specific provision on it and is zoned agricultural. In terms of the zoning, so as mentioned, the current lot line, you see the affected lands on this graphic. The lot lines would basically eventually be moved and would line up with the proposed R5 and R12 zoning. So key facts, a public information meeting was held on April 27th of this year. No public comments were received on this application. Only one resident did show up, which was the neighboring property owner. No concerns were raised by any commenting agency at staff or regional levels. And planning staff have no objection to the proposed zoning amendment application as it conforms to the policy direction of the Livable Oakville official plan. And the design details, again, will be further addressed through the site plan review process. So staff are recommending that comments be received from the public tonight, and as well as the application by amount investments be approved, and that the bylaw attached to this report, which allows for future residential uses, to be passed.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, council? Are there any members of the public with information for the council to consider on this item? Councillor Adams, did I see your hand?
I do have a question of our staff, since there are no members of the public here for it. One question is around the grading issue. Is that dealt with through site plan, or is that dealt with as part of the application?
As part of the site plan, through you, Mayor Burton,
Okay.
as part of the site plan process, we will look at the grading issues in detail.
Okay, so if neighbors have issues with that, that's the appropriate place for them to go.
Correct.
Or that's when it'll be dealt with. The other question I had was, in the building process, because it's an infill location with existing neighbors who've been there for a long time on both sides, in both the front and the back, how is it going to be dealt with in terms of the building foundation work, the disruption, the dust, the mud, all that goes in at the same time as a new home gets put in? How should the neighbors deal with those particular disruptions? And how do we make sure that they aren't disrupted unduly by things like foundation digging and construction work that's going on?
Councillor, I'm not sure those are planning questions.
No, they are not, and so I'm not trying to hold up, but in terms of trying to make sure that the neighborhood understands.
Let's take that upstairs to the commissioner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. If the property boundaries, which I don't think they are, the setback requirements are very close to the property, the building department could ask for some understanding of the impact on adjacent lots. But in this particular case, I think the side yard setbacks already resemble the zone itself, so I wouldn't see that as being likely or necessary as part of the building permit process.
For there to be fencing and that sort of thing put up?
There would be the normal shoring requirements or any other requirements that the building department would kick in. But given for a house foundation, I wouldn't see there'd be onerous requirements, given that it already reflects the side yard setbacks in that type of zone anyway.
No, we're looking for appropriate things to be done. And so it would be through the building department that if neighbors were inquiring as to how it would be dealt with, that's where they should go.
Yes, John Tudor, the Director of Building Services, would probably be the most important person for them to speak to if they had questions about requirements that we'd be putting through the building permit process. You do need to remember, as I'm sure you're already aware, through the building permit process, we're required to apply the building code requirements only. The town can't require any additional requirements. Those would be put in place either through zoning requirements or through any nuisance bylaw that the town has. So you had also asked about the noise and dust standards. That would fall within the nuisance bylaws if indeed they were triggered at all through the process.
Thank you very much. That's all I had. So if there are no other questions, I'll happily move the recommendations.
Thank you for your motion. I just want to underline, though, that there is no right anywhere to disturb a neighbor's property. If you don't have enough land to do what you're trying to do, you have to make adjustments, not your neighbor. And now the enforcement of that right is a civil action, and the town has always been reluctant to act in the place of the affected neighbor. So there are issues around, while there's no right to disturb your neighbor, it's not the town's power to enforce that, it's the disturbed neighbor's legal power to defend themselves. So it's a bit of a gray area in terms of what you were looking for, which was an absolute protection of the neighbors. So they have a right not to be disturbed, but they have to enforce their right.
Thank you for clarifying that for everybody. I appreciate that. You're absolutely right, and that really does need to come out, that there is it's a two-party system, if you will, on that.
Yeah. All right. The motion's been moved. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and it carries. And that brings us to our third public hearing, and this, I believe, is, like all the rest, no longer a recommendation. This is back to a public comment hearing. And so if you'll turn your attention to our Senior Manager of Current Planning, Mr. Scott Hanna, we will begin this item. Mr. Hanna.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Town Council. Tonight you're going to be introduced to 5 proposed subdivisions in North Oakville, which are visually displayed on your overhead now. And in a few minutes, Gabe Charles and Lee Musson and Tricia Collingwood will be talking about the individual subdivisions that they're managing. And we felt, given the timing of all of these coming forward at this particular point, it would be probably useful to have a quick reminder and overview of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. So that's my goal tonight, is to take 5 or 10 minutes and just bring council and those in the audience up to date with North Oakville. As many of you know, the creation of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan was a long and exhausting planning process that started off with a number of studies in the late 1990s and the plan itself in the early 2000s. And it was subject to a lengthy OMB process that resulted ultimately in a settlement between the town and the North Oakville Community Builders Incorporated in early 2008. That was still 5 years ago. And while it was created prior to a number of important planning documents, that being the update to the PPS and the growth plan, it did achieve the required targets for growth based on those 2 documents. So tonight, what I'm hoping to do very quickly is take you through these topic areas, the vision, particular, the importance of how the community structure was influenced by the natural heritage system approach, the land use and master plan, a little bit about the phasing requirements in North Oakville, some of the implementation tools that we now use to assess development, a little bit on allocation and where it stands relative to the 5 plans, and a bit of some summary comments. So as far as the vision goes, it was based on a number of very important planning principles. We're looking to achieve here a pedestrian-oriented community, and one of which it is compact, where it creates compact and complete neighborhoods. As I mentioned before, the community pattern was significantly influenced by the natural heritage system approach, and you'll see that in a couple of visuals in a few minutes. It was based on a very complete trail system, a diverse range of housing opportunities, not only from detached but through semi-detached townhouse and apartment-style accommodation, including live-work arrangements and also accessory apartments. It comes with a transit-first orientation and principle, and also, in order to be complete, provides for a range of employment opportunities. There are a number of plans within the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. This is one of them, the Community Structure Plan. And again, I want to emphasize again that it was very much influenced by the natural heritage system. All of the green that you see on this plan forms part of that natural heritage system, especially the light green area. The core areas and buffers are to be protected, and again, you see some linkages there were established to allow sustainability, and there's also the protection of stream corridors, and they're given different classifications, both high, ones that are to be protected in situ, in other words, not to be moved, and also medium and low being allowed to be moved, as long as, of course, their function both hydrologically and ecologically are protected. The one thing I've learned as a fellow that's now been employed by the town for a couple of years and studied this particular plan at great length is the features within the core areas themselves are to be protected and enhanced, whereas the features, and I use the example of trees, in the other areas that are to undergo development can be removed. And the term is, if it's in, it's in, and if it's out, it's out. And that's to provide a balance. So the green is protected and the other areas are subject to development rights. The structure, as you see in front of you, includes 14 neighborhoods. Those are the areas that have the pink numbers. An employment district next to the 407 in the north part of the plan. A number of mixed-use areas. Those are the areas in blue. They're called urban core areas along Dundas and Trafalgar and Neagawa and Burnhamthorpe intersection. That's where we anticipate a high degree of density and intensification within this newly developed area. A grid pattern, as you can see, has been established for the streets, and the reason for the grid pattern obviously is to support transportation alternatives, not only car, but also importantly transit and walking and biking alternatives. Going hand in hand with the structure, community structure plan is also another plan which forms part of the secondary plan, and that's the land use plan. And within that, you'll see a number of different colors. The gray areas are your neighborhood areas. The blue areas is your urban core areas, not only again along Dundas, but also Trafalgar. And you will see the employment district again at the top end, and obviously the green protecting the natural heritage system. Included in the land use plan and policy are a number of housing and density targets for each of those neighborhoods. And you'll also see a number of different symbols there, including for parks and for schools and stormwater management ponds. And those are showing, again, general locations for those types of facilities. So the level of the puzzle making is getting finer and finer. You also have part of the process for the creation of the secondary plan was a master plan. And very important here, it's to depict graphically the design of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan area. And I'm showing again conceptually where those 5 plans that you're going to hear about tonight are located within the master plan. The most important thing about the master plan, though, is it's an appendix to the secondary plan. It doesn't form part of the plan, although there are a number of policies that relate to it. So when we see plans of subdivision come forward, they are expected to be consistent with this master plan, but there is also room for flexibility. And that's what a lot of people anyway that we deal with across the counter and who are giving us advice and their concerns don't understand that there is flexibility here. For example, some of the portions of roads can be moved. There are modifications allowed to the location of the medium and low constraint streams, and also the location or the final location of parks and schools. and swim ponds. There's even an allowance within the plan to shift the neighborhood land uses, the categories, within a property itself, as long as it doesn't influence or negatively influence and shift those particular categories to other property owners. So again, there are flexibility, and again, you'll hear about that later on when the plans are presented individually. Here again is the master plan itself, and there's phasing policies, and generally there's 3 phases. Generally, you're looking for the phases to occur from the southerly section of the plan to the north. But you'll notice that large brown swath that I just put up there, that's some of your urban core areas and also the employment areas. Those are unphased. So they can occur at any particular time as long as the region has approved servicing for the development. In addition to the unphased areas, again, you have phase 2 conceptually shown. So as you move across from west to east on phase 1, then you're intended to loop back to the west again, and ultimately into phase 3. And this whole particular graphic that you see in front of us shows, the next 20 to 25 years of growth for this area. There also is, however, flexibility within the plan itself to allow areas within phase 2 to proceed ahead of the full build-out of phase 1, provided a couple of things happen. And they are the concurrent development of at least 25 hectares of employment and 10 hectares of the Trafalgar urban core coming forward. So again, trying to create that complete community that brings forward mixed use, employment, and residential at the same time. There is some flexibility to move forward with some of those other areas. The plan also comes with a number of implementation tools. I've listed a few on this particular graphic, but they include the zoning bylaw, urban design and open space guidelines, the trails plan that's been front and center in front of council lately. More importantly, the North Oakville Urban Forestry Strategic Master Plan that's been highly debated over the last little while as well. The Parks Facility Plan is another example, and the North Oakville Transit Plan. Very important, and as I mentioned before, a little earlier, the region, in order for any phasing to occur, has had to approve the servicing for the particular development. And the way we do this in Oakville is to have allocation approved. At the present time, I would mention that all 5 plans that you're going to hear about tonight do not currently have any approved allocation within the regional allocation program. But that's not to say that they haven't tried, because all 5 last year did put forward efforts to participate in the 2012 allocation program. And I'm not going to give you the exact numbers, but it ends up closing in on 1,700 single detached equivalents for all 5 plans. So there is an interest in carrying on with phases of these developments. Right now, as you're aware, that program is currently on hold pending the resolution of the development charges appeal. But once that is resolved, then obviously these plans could come back for a decision. So we're obviously not there yet. And in summary, one of the messages I want to leave with you tonight before you hear the individual plans is that we're early in the review process. Obviously, again, we're here for the public meetings tonight, so you will be not making any decisions. All you're here for, as you know, is to look at what are the planning matters to be addressed and ensure that some of the questions and comments that we hear from the public are acknowledged. Following our public meetings tonight, there will be a detailed technical review on each of the individual properties and subdivisions. And I will mention that modifications may be needed. I could have used the word will be needed to bring the plans into conformity with the secondary plan. There also are a number of issues that I would say that are going to be consistent with all of the 5 plans that you will see here tonight. Obviously, in order to bring them forward, we will need to have full conformity with the policies of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. We will be looking at great detail at the land use and housing mix being proposed to make sure, again, they conform. We need to ensure that the preservation of the natural heritage system occurs in each of the particular plans. Following through on the transit first principle and ensure that transit can be established with even the first phase of any one of these developments. We will be looking obviously at servicing and infrastructure and ensuring that the allocation has been achieved for each of the developments. And there will be a number of coordination and timing issues, for example, with schools and parks. So, Your Worship, I'm prepared to answer, and as is the rest of the team, any questions you might have on the general overview, and then we'll turn our attention to the individual plans.
Thank you. I have two. The first is that one of those later points of yours, the transit first policy that Council is very concerned about. And I'm not understanding how we get transit first if we don't have density first. And I know that, I'm pretty sure that everybody up here shares this concern of mine. Can you tell us how we're going to get the density first in order to support transit first?
Through Your Worship to the rest of Council, couple of comments I would make is with a lot of the plans that you're seeing this evening, a lot of them are adjacent to some of the urban core areas, not only along Dundas but Trafalgar. So the importance for us will be to zone those areas and provide for the opportunities. Having been in this business for 30 years, I know market tends to dictate a lot, and so therefore the low-hanging fruit tends to come first. But if you can still zone for those opportunities and make them aware that they're available, sometimes you start to see that density. So that's the first issue. The second issue is trying to ensure that we have transit or intermediate transit going when these things are phased. If you looked at the ultimate, what I would call master plan, once all of the grid system is in place, it's going to be easy to provide transit for these areas. The question is ensuring that on an interim basis that we get appropriate transit servicing these new neighborhoods. And I know, having dealt with our folks in transit, that's one of the issues that we look at in great detail with these plans of subdivision.
I just want to help you because my concern is to have the density to provide the passengers to make the transit work. Because there's an interrelationship here, and I don't personally regard anything up there as low-hanging fruit. What you're calling low-hanging fruit, I would rather refer to as the carrot in order to get the density first. But I guess we're going to have to struggle with that as we go down the road together on this. I just wanted to give voice to Council's concern that the pattern we've seen over the years is, they build the low density and then you get applications to excuse them from the density and you never get the density. Transit always suffers, and then you're treated to a diet of complaints about insufficiently full buses. So this is an important point for Council, and I hope planning can put a sharp point on it for the developers. The other question I had was, you gave a great deal of stress to the flexibility that's contemplated in the plan, and but then you assured us that modifications will be needed to make sure that these applications conform to the secondary plan, and that they're going to need, quote, full conformity to the secondary plan. I liked the sound of that better than I liked the previous sound. Can you clear up the contradiction for me?
Certainly, through you, Your Worship, to the rest of Council. The point I think I was trying to make is that the master plan it's a well-planned community in terms of its road network and showing how all the other important components of new neighborhoods are to take place in school in terms of your commercial, your institutional, and your business land uses, and your parks and things like that. It's not a set in stone design, though, when you see the local streets. Like you may have local streets that are going north and south, and then the applicant comes in and says, I want to put the streets east and west for whatever reason as part of the detailed design. The flexibility exists for that. Similar with parks and schools, you may have a symbol for what I would call one of your urban squares on a particular graphic within the secondary plan, and it may move slightly, still meeting the intent to serve that neighborhood, but it still has been shifted. So it's not.
So the 500-meter walk line, for example, would still prevail in terms of, that would limit the flexibility of moving the urban center? Is that what you're saying?
That's a good analogy and a good example, correct.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. You sort of cleared the decks of, I guess, two of my main questions, but I do have one follow-up comment. You mentioned the density issue, and that when density doesn't happen first, often there will be an application to change, to go back, or the other side of that is that, or the developer then tries to bring in density and then has to fight its own residents to achieve that density because, of course, residents in low-density neighborhoods don't necessarily like having apartments overlooking their homes like we heard this evening. So that's a good point to reiterate. My question is actually with respect to the 2 Ward 5 applications. There is a reference in the Mattamy application that doesn't exist in the other one with respect to historical context or the historical properties along Dundas Street. So on the 6-line application, it doesn't actually refer to it, but it refers to it in the Mattamy application. Is there going to be a historical building inventory review of those properties along Dundas for both applications? And can that be, and can you explain what that looks like in the, like, what we can expect in the near future on that?
I'm seeing nods through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Knoll. The other thing we could do this evening too is when that particular application is vetted, to direct the question to Lee or Gabe, or whatever application it actually relates to. I think it's probably Lee's. Yeah, it's Gabe.
I can do that. I just, the only thing is I had seen it in number 10. It refers to number 9. But number 9 doesn't refer to historical context at all, so I just wanted to make sure that that was covered off. I can ask the question on the specific application if needed.
Sounds like you better.
Yeah, I think I will.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Any more questions about the overview? Mr. Hanna, thank you very much for the overview and your attention to the points that Council and I have raised.
Mayor Burton, can I ask one overview question, I guess?
Yes.
Because it applies, I think, to all of them. And can you walk us through in minute detail how the review of the NHS is going to happen? So we know there are different kinds of streams. We know there's features, but how do we on the ground make sure that what we had in the original maps is what we're going to get in each of the 5 cases?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Adams, one of the submission requirements for the North Oakville area is the receipt of a very detailed document called an Environmental Implementation Report and a Functional Servicing Strategy. They're very detailed and thick documents, and what happens is that's part of the submission for the application, and it is reviewed not only by staff, both engineering and planning, but also by Conservation Halton and the region. And it's through that review process, which is extremely time-consuming, that we come to the conclusion that we've either met the objectives in the NHS or not.
And in the cases of the various the stream corridors, where there were the red ones, which I'll try and describe as you can't move them kind of thing, and then there's the ones that are not so constrained, the low constraint ones. How much leeway is there on those lower constraint ones in terms of burying them, moving them, and all of that? Because there's a couple of cases where I've seen that kind of thing. There appears to be huge variation between what was originally shown and what's now being shown or being proposed.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Adams, again, conceptually, some of the streams that are able to be moved are shown that way on the master plan. I was dealing with one personally the other day on 6th Line, where one of the streams, which was a medium constraint stream, was moved. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the stream still has to, from a hydrological and ecological perspective, satisfy the requirements for that particular stream. There is a little bit of wiggle room with the movement of the streams, but again, it also has to balance with the housing targets that are also in the plan. But it is done through the overall review of the EIR.
Buried in the, well, maybe not so buried, pretty visible to me in the councillor's question was a reference to burying streams. Are you saying that the low constraint streams can be buried? And if so, how does that preserve the hydrological and ecological function?
Through your worship, my understanding of the low constraint streams that they're very much intermittent streams, and they can in fact be piped. The medium constraint streams are not to be piped. They are simply potentially shifted in their location.
Thank you for that. Mr. Elgar.
Just one general question before we get into specifics, because I've got a lot on each specific. We have applications before us tonight where the only way to get to them would be by helicopter. Is that a complete application in planning staff's view?
Are you stumped?
I'm stumped, thank you, your worship.
Commissioner, when Mr. Hanna is stumped, it rises automatically to you.
I think you might be referring to the applications on the east side. I think it's the Dunoak and the Brassa applications. And the issue I think that's identified in the reports are the phasing plans and how those plans function as full communities. When you draw the phasing line through, they're not connected. They only come down to Dundas, but they're not connected between each other. So you actually can't get to them from Dundas. So that's an issue in terms of community building that we'd be dealing with in terms of looking at those applications and reporting back.
Okay, I'm not sure on the left-hand side of that H that you can actually get there, but anyway, we'll deal with that, I guess.
So, if I understood your answer, Commissioner, just help me to make sure I understood. Community building is an important piece of the plan. Access to the land will be required. These are things to be worked out as you go forward with the application.
Yes, and I think what complicates it in those two is those lands are in two different phases. The first phase is towards the Dundas frontage, but the application stretches back into the phase 2 land. So the question is, how does that over time evolve? And that phasing issue, coupled with the other issues that you had mentioned, are ones that we'll look at in the recommendation report.
Now, if phasing meant anything when it was invented for this, doesn't that mean that if you're an applicant and you're landlocked, you've got to work with your neighbors who could provide you access? In a cooperative and business-like way, I assume.
Yes, I would assume so too, and there are requirements within the secondary plan about a developer's agreement, so it certainly does structure it in terms of working together through that process.
Oh, wrong button. Great, thank you. So then let's thank Mr. Hanna and turn to Gabe Charles. And I guess this is the 6th line, 41 Dundas Street.
Correct.
Number 9.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and this one, for council's benefit, we've combined 6th line and the adjacent application 404072, which is the Mattamy subdivision, just for ease of reference, because these two applications are linked together. They are both for plan of subdivision as well as zoning amendment.
Okay, so before you keep going, I'm having trouble understanding you. So either we need more gain on his microphone, or we need Mr. Charles, you to be closer to your microphone, or you could shout.
I'd rather not shout, but thank you, sir. So the subject properties are located the northeast of Dundas and on 6th line. You'll see the hatching for 6th Line Corporation there, as well as the adjacent Mattamy subdivision. The 6th Line Corporation file, it fronts onto both 6th Line as well as Dundas. Well, the Mattamy proposal does extend from Dundas right up to Burnhamthorpe Road. There is a registered plan of subdivision on the west side of 6th Line known as the Timpson subdivision, and directly east of the hatched parcel there, the Mattamy site, is the application by Green Ginger, which is also for plan of subdivision and zoning amendment. The properties are currently vacant and they're used for agricultural purposes, and portions of the NHS do cut through these sites. These are the plans of subdivisions for the two applications, 6th Line Corporation on the left and Mattamy on the right. There are various blocks for residential purposes in both of these subdivisions, as well as neighborhood park, school site, stormwater pond, and Dundas urban core blocks along the southern edge of these subdivisions. The major east-west roads will link in with the subdivisions to the east and the west of the subject lands. This slide illustrates what the lands are currently designated in the North Oakville East secondary plan. The land use designations include neighborhood area, natural heritage system area, and Dundas urban core. There are village square, elementary school, and neighborhood park also identified in the official plan schedule. At this time, there are no amendments proposed to the secondary plan to implement these proposals. As Mr. Hanna was explaining the flexibility in the master plan, it does provide, however, greater clarity to the distribution of land uses which are found in the secondary plan schedule, including the potential street layout. The subdivision plans themselves do not strictly adhere to the master plan. They're fairly close in implementing what is seen on the master plan. They're maintaining the intent is essentially what staff are looking at. The comments from the various public agencies as well as other departments will be incorporated into any refinements to these subdivision plans as we continue to move along. In terms of things that staff are currently reviewing, the overall subdivision design and the integration of that design with the adjacent land uses as well as transit and cycling, pedestrian facilities, again, the preservation enhancement of the natural heritage system, and also the servicing. As Mr. Hanna pointed out, that we don't yet have servicing allocated to these subdivisions. However, that will be reviewed as well as identifying the potential phasing limits for the subdivisions. Regarding next steps, staff will continue to evaluate agency and public comments for these subdivisions with the intent of providing council with a final recommendation. The recommendations are for the public meetings are presented for you on the screen, and if there are any questions, we would be pleased to answer those.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. My first question is, this microphone sounds bad. Wow. The first question is the one I raised earlier during the overview, and that is with respect to the historical properties on Dundas Street. Can you just maybe talk about what the plan is for inventorying those, studying those, et cetera? What will we see, when will we see it, and what's being undertaken?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a heritage impact assessment was just submitted for 41 Dundas about a week ago. So staff are currently reviewing that. There are implications for, you're quite correct, Councillor, the Six Line Corp as well as the Mattamy site. So those it's currently being reviewed. The findings, conclusions from that will be integrated into final recommendation for council.
So the study has been done and it's been received?
Correct.
Okay. We have a family in the audience that are here concerned about the number 10 item, the Mattamy proposal, and their specific concern relates to the school site designation or the school site proposal that is on Mattamy's application. So first of all, point of clarification, the fact that the school site has been moved on the Mattamy proposal in no way reflects on the decision of the town or council as to where that school site would eventually be located, correct?
Here, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Are you currently in discussions with the applicant on that particular issue, and do you have any additional information that you can provide as to potentially solutions for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this particular issue was raised at the public information meeting, which was held at the tail end of February, and that was subsequently conveyed to the applicant, and my understanding is that they were going back to take a look at what I'll call the southeast corner of Burnham Thorpe and 6th Line. What was provided as part of the draft plan, and just to keep in mind, the northern, I'll say 2/3 of the subdivision is in the second phase. As Mr. Hanna had pointed out, there are really 3 phases really for the development of North Oakville, and that northern 2/3 is in the second phase. So what it was illustrating was properties adjacent, just to show really the integration, which is something that we continuously mentioned to applicants, is that we need to understand how not just the actual subdivision is working, but how it's going to influence properties adjacent. So what had been illustrated without any prejudice was potential road and block location exercise. And it did identify a deviation from the master plan that was raised with the applicant. My understanding is they've subsequently gone back to take a look at how they can fix or amend or modify their own subdivision so that it will have a positive modification to properties adjacent.
On your issues list that you had on the slide and that's located within the report in number 10, there's a number of issues that you're, I guess, that you're going to be focusing on but not limited to. I don't see that one in your work plan. Can you assure me that that is one that you are keeping top of mind and is in your work plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is certainly top of mind. Is also, as part of the exercise, we need to identify what the actual limits of the first phase of the subdivision would be, so that we also buy ourselves what I'll call some more time to deal with properties closer to Burnhamthorpe.
My next question relates to the, I guess it's more of a general principle question. We've experienced now a situation where an applicant has come forward with a proposal and they have, I will say arbitrarily, placed a designation on somebody's private property, and it has caused great degree of stress and distress to the owners of that property. How do we avoid this from happening in the future? Because obviously there was a lot of unnecessary, hopefully unnecessary unrest as a result of this, and disruption to this particular family who are simply trying to enjoy the peaceful and quiet enjoyment of their property. Is there anything we can do to maybe inform our applicants better, or to I guess give them better advice when they're bringing applications in to avoid this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly when we do meet with applications through a pre-consultation, or applicants through a pre-consultation process, we do identify the steps that are needed, what the land use designation is, what the master plan is illustrating, with the caveat, of course, that there is a little bit of flexibility to that, and it really comes down to how it gets implemented. But also to ensure that, as I said a little bit earlier, was that we're conscious of how we're integrating new subdivisions with the adjacent land uses, the existing ones as well as the proposed ones. And the proposed ones are really illustrated through the master plan. So we certainly work with applicants to try and identify what it is that we would prefer to see. Once an application comes in, we use that opportunity to then meet with the public, as we had through the public information meeting held in February, to further discuss that, refine that, take those comments back to an applicant and acknowledge that there are some things that we still need to work on.
Yeah, I get all that. I guess my fundamental concern here is that there are a lot of parcels of land that have been acquired by developers. Boy, this mic sounds horrible. There are a lot of property. Can I use yours? Sure. Thank you. Very image conscious. There are a lot of properties that have already been acquired. Most of the properties have been acquired by developers, and so when a developer proposes something on other developers' land, perhaps the impact isn't quite as great. I think that the point I'm trying to make is that I think we need to be very sensitive, and so is the development community, that there are families and people that we fought for on council years ago when OPA 198 was first being negotiated, to make sure that residents that are there can have peaceful enjoyment of their property. And this is another example of where that has been disrupted. So I guess there's probably no answer you can give me. I really wanted to make that statement and hope that that anybody listening, Madame, Bressa, anybody else that is working on files up there can keep that in mind, that creates really bad will. And we need to be sure that we're cognizant of the fact that, notwithstanding that North Oakville is largely greenfield, there are a lot of existing families, and there is a community up there, and that needs to be always kept top of mind.
Well, Councillor, tell me if this formulation of that might work better for sending a message. Council, I know you and all the rest of us recognize that the law permits you to apply for any damn thing you want, right? And we've already heard there's a certain amount of flexibility contemplated in the plan. But everybody who's experienced with this council knows that we have our values, and we have a certain amount of flexibility too. And if they want a happy outcome, they'll maybe have better regard for the concerns that you voiced.
My assistant here has pressed the button for me again. Thank you. That's exactly the point I was trying to convey. I understand that there is what is available in law, but there's also what is common decency. And I'm not suggesting that any one applicant is less decent than another, but I think that it's something to keep in mind, particularly when developing the area. So thank you for summing that up for me, Your Worship.
To draw a line under it, I mean to say that we have no power to prevent somebody from making an application that will annoy or distress neighbors. Our power lies in what we approve or not. And if they're looking for flexibility, it's not a good way to get it from us by annoying our constituents.
Bingo.
All right. Mr. Charles, thank you very much.
Well, through
Councillor Elgar now would like to ask a few questions.
Thank you very much. Through Your Worship, I realize tonight you're just looking for planning issues that we bring to you. We're not looking for answers, but to me, both of these applications, number 9 specifically and number 10, they look like shifting sand on a beach, the way things have been moving around. And I'd like you, if you take a look at, on application 9 by itself, on page, and I believe you've got a good schematic up there, you show the elementary school and the parkland all on the applicant's land initially, or on your official plan. But if you go to page 221 of the report, and if you could put that one up, you can see that only a small portion of the elementary school is now on the applicant's land, and a very small portion of the park also. And my concern is about building partial schools and partial parks. Like, does planning staff agree with that type of, and does it not become more difficult to negotiate if you're only dealing with part of something?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can readily admit it's never easy to try and secure an entire block when there's a property line that bisects the block. That said, that's the same reason why we're running these applications as concurrent as we possibly can, to ensure that once the school board has determined that there's a pressing immediate need to get the block, that at least we have been able to identify the block as much as possible, or at least where the limits of that block would be across the 2 different planes of subdivision. And again, that's working with the different school boards, the 2 school boards, to secure those lands.
So, but you're saying then they have to deal with 2 different people to secure enough land for a school. Similarly, the town, to have a park, has to deal with 2 different people, when the other person can say, well, on the master plan, that park is not on my property. I really hope going forward that we deal with that coming back, with the next report coming back.
Well, Councillor, I'd like can I have a piece of this?
Yeah, I do have more pieces.
But I'd like to go to, I'll come back to you right away, but I just want to move up to the Commissioner for a second. I believe we're dedicated to 2 high-level principles here that ought to have some applicability here. One is complete communities, and the other is comprehensive planning. And because of those 2 principles, I would expect that if somebody's coming forward with only a piece of something that's required for a complete community, I don't understand how he can expect to move forward through the planning process until the companion planning pieces are brought into your active review. Is that in fact the case? Can we tie these things? I mean, if you want to move something off of your land into the, I'm assuming, unknown, if you want to raise the uncertainty level around you, can't we, invoking those 2 principles, hold you back until your surrounding area is caught up?
That is why I think Mr. Charles had indicated that these 2 applications are proceeding along in tandem, because they both share the park and the school. So we need to look at them together. And I'm sure by the time we get to the subdivision conditions, there'll be some requirement to link those so that you could proceed as one consistent block. So those are the very issues to look at, because comprehensive development and community building are some of those fundamental principles.
And I just remembered your other your third principle, the requirement for agreements among developers. So among those 3 things, I think we'll be comforted somewhat by that, Councillor. So keep going, though.
Well, I sure hope so, because it doesn't make it difficult dealing with 2 different people where you need both halves of the piece to make it work. I think the Commissioner has something else to say.
The only other thing I'd add is that there are also requirements under our parkland agreement with the developers that once a community reaches a certain level, there's an obligation that the entire park, even if it's wholly located off of their lands within that community, need to be dedicated. So there is some provisions in our parkland requirements to achieve those objectives. There's not the same provisions, though, on the school board property. So that's still an issue we need to deal with.
Thank you. Okay, fast forward to North Oakville East secondary plan, and I would ask staff to go back and take a look at the creek. On, if you go to page 218 of your report, you will see that we have a meandering stream on that, and I know it is shaded now that it is medium. It did have a red crayon on it for years, and I think maybe part of the negotiation it got a blue crayon, but luckily it got a purple crayon in the middle of it, which told you that it is an issue hydrologically, a feature. So if staff could go back and take a look at why it has been channeled in a straight line rather than the meandering belt, I'm concerned it might lose the feature. So I would ask staff to do that. And on the number, application number 10, also similar, the question is, and I think Councillor Knoll has raised it, and the Mayor has talked to it also, about shifting a school which wasn't on their property in the first place to other people's property. That is an interesting proposal, but I'm glad to hear that maybe that will get rectified very fast before it moves anywhere. So I guess on your two, those would be my issues going forward. And then we'll get on to the next round, 11, 12, and 13. Thank you.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of questions on the same two applications. I realize that you're just in the review process. Going through the proponent's draft zoning amendment, just a couple of things I'd like some help on. They're talking about bay box bow windows with or without foundations shall be permitted to encroach onto a flankage yard, and the other one being stairs and air vents associated with underground parking are permitted in any yard. I know from comments that this council makes on a fairly regular basis, we're concerned about buyers and having them aware. Is this a common or a new way of building in terms of having a foundation on a flankage yard or a doorway onto a flankage yard? Just not familiar with that one.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are some permissions that do address that in the parent bylaw. It's how we clearly define those types of elements, I'll call them, which do go into a required yard. And it's also the amount that either it goes in, but also the amount of area that it takes up proportionally to that. With respect to the air vents, things like that, those are generally things that we would expect to have flush with grade. But again, through this process, because it is just a draft bylaw that the proponent has offered, it gives us the opportunity to go through and fine tune and tweak as necessary.
Look forward to seeing it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, Councillor Knoll.
I'll just give you a motion when you want one.
Let me first ask the public if there are any members of the public with information for council on this item, and I don't see any hands, but I do have a notice of, we received written letters from Mr. and Mrs. Benke, and Mrs. Benke, are you satisfied with having delivered your remarks in writing, or did you want to say anything else? Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're content to leave things at what you've said in your letter, and you know that we all can read, and in fact, many of us have already read it. Thank you. All right, thank you very much for being here. Anyone else on either of these items, number 9 or number 10? Going once, twice, thrice. Thank you. I confine this to table. Councillor Knoll, your motion.
Your Worship, I'm going to move the receipt of both of these applications. I want to just emphasize that as one of the ward councillors, thank you, Mark. As one of the ward councillors in Ward 5 and in North Oakville, I'll be looking very carefully at this school board, or the school property issue when it comes back, and be looking for a resolution to that, because we've had this happen once before in North Oakville. It's still an ongoing issue with that particular property, and I'd never want to see this happen again to our residents. So, but just one piece of good news, I did hear from Mr. Korsiak, who is the planner for the item number 10, and he's indicated that they are working hard at bringing the school property back to where it's supposed to be in the master plan. So I'm going to optimistically and cautiously say that I'm glad that we're working in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor. Other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are we going to do 11 and 12? What's the batching for the next? 11 and 12 together? All right, Lee Musson, you have our undivided attention.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. This evening I'm here to present to you two applications. Bresta Developments Limited is item 11 on your agenda, and Dunoak Developments is item 12. Both of these applications were submitted in September of last year, and both were deemed complete November 1st, 2012. This is the air photo, which shows roughly where the Bresta lands are located, fronting on Dundas Street. They also have frontage on Burnhamthorpe Road, and Dunoak has frontage on Dundas Street. The Bresta subdivision is approximately 100 hectares in size, but the draft plan of subdivision that's been submitted to the town for review really consists of a smaller portion of the site, and so it's a bit of a detail. It shows blocks of land along the Dundas frontage. It has it's for approximately 532 units with natural heritage system, 2 stormwater management ponds, and 2 village squares. The natural heritage system is consistent with the Joshua Creek and the Dunoak subdivision. Again, that's for about 918 units. It's about 44 hectares in size. It has blocks along Dundas Street for the Dundas Urban Core, 1 village square, a portion of the natural heritage system, which is a small component of Core 10, 1 stormwater management pond, a partial block for a school, and a partial block for a park. Again, the master plan sets out, the North Oakville East Secondary Plan designates the sites as Dundas Street Urban Core, neighborhood area, natural heritage system, and village squares. The master plan, again, it provides more of a conceptual design of how the lands north of Dundas can be developed. It shows generally shows land use roads, stormwater management ponds, school blocks, and parks. Both developments have slightly shifted the village squares on the site, although the Dunoak plan is missing 1 village square, which I have brought to the attention of the developer, which I do expect to see in a future submission. In terms of the issues that will come forward in a future recommendation report to council, we will be looking at the conformity with the secondary plan, at the size and location of the village squares, views to the natural heritage system, functional servicing and stormwater management, as well as the road right-of-way and connectivity through the developments, linkage to abutting lands, the housing mix and density, and obviously the servicing allocation, which Mr. Hanna had mentioned earlier. So our next steps are to continue reviewing the application. We did provide the applicant with an extensive list of issues. We anticipate resubmission in the near future. So at this point in time, we are recommending that council receive the applications and then look forward to a public report in the future.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Lee? 2, Councillor Adams and Councillor Elger. Councillor Adams Ward.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. There's a couple of things I wanted to go through, and I've had discussions with the staff on some of these already, but I thought I'd lay them out again tonight. The first is the road layout that's being used really in both. And I wondered if maybe you could go back to, that one's a pretty good map. and those ones are fine too. When I looked at those, and then I went and I looked back at the master plan maps, the grids are different, and I'm concerned that we're losing some of the connectivity that we had originally envisioned when we were looking at the design of the neighborhoods. So I'm glad that continues to be on the list of things to review. So I don't think I need to say any more. I know that you're looking at that particular issue. The other is the NHS locations, and the second one, I'm pretty sure that it's a red crayon, and it's not a washable crayon, Councillor Elgar. It's a permanent one. This goes back to the issue of making sure that we've got the delineation down right, and I'd like to make sure that those things are happening the way we're expecting them to. There's one other question I'll bring you to, which is the road connection at Dundas. In both of them, how are they going to connect in with the road locations on the south side? So I know one is, I guess as you go along, there's Meadow Ridge and there's Prince Michael that get connected in eventually. And I think there's one location where there is nothing on the south side. How's it proposed to work in terms of the connection with Dundas?
Through your worship to the councillor, this is the Dunoak plan. The connection for the Dunoak plan does align with Prince Michael. And let me see if I can find the Bresta connection. I don't believe corresponds to one on the south side. We still need to hear from the region with respect to we haven't provided us comments yet, so that was one thing that I have flagged for them, is to have a look at these connections to make sure that they're appropriate.
Okay, so some of the questions and concerns that have come forward are around when that construction happens, how do we ensure that we don't get disruption on the south side as the functionality of the intersection comes to be. So if we can understand, I'd like to understand that better. I mean, I know there's going to have to be something that changes when that gets connected, but if first of all we can understand how it's proposed to happen, I think it would help us in terms of the commentary that we need to give back. And then there's another school block location in the midst of this set of applications, which I think end up having the same kind of issues that you guys have over in the other ones that we were just discussing. And I know it's not really intended to be part of this immediate phase. I think it's meant to be in the next piece, if I'm correct. But I'd like to understand the implications of these two locations being brought forward at the same time, and because you've got one parcel of land that's being brought forward right now, and the second one on page 270, I think it is. No. Trying to find the right, and that shows it best. I guess on 269 sort of shows it, or 265 shows the detail. But then the other application that comes with it, back on in the Bressa development, it doesn't include that chunk where the school is.
It's through your worship. I have the master plan on the screen. What we have then is the draft plan of subdivision as submitted by Mattamy is actually showing in this location a school where the master plan is actually showing a park. And then the top corner of the Mattamy's subdivision shows the park here. So Parks and Open Space has flagged an issue with regards to the orientation of the park. We've made them aware of that. So we do need to look at that further through the further review.
Okay, those are the extra things I wanted to bring forward tonight. But I do appreciate the discussions that I've had previously with the staff and the applicants on it.
Thank you. Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, it's actually Councillor Adams has covered a lot of it. At the elementary school, where you only have 0.67 of a hectare, and the park you only have 0.2 of a hectare. Again, piecemealing things, it's not going to work. I don't believe so. I hope staff really get that sorted out with the development industry so they understand that we're going to do that. Can you also show me how the phasing will work? If I, on the two, say the lands on page 257, the subject land, I think there's phase 1, 2, 3 maybe. I don't think I saw anything on that, and I know there's going to be. I'm just wondering how that will all roll out.
Well, the current application for Bressa, it is 100 hectares in size. As you can see here, it's kind of a very irregular shaped parcel. The subdivision that they've submitted to us basically cuts across here, so they're only looking for approval for this portion, which would be their phase 1 lands. Anything north of this, and including this strip down here, would be part of a future phase of development. And then the Dun Oak, this is their first phase. So this is all in one phase, whereas this particular site couldn't be developed as one phase, given the fact that it's not part of there's many phasing plans on the site.
When I looked at the left-hand side of that H, though, nothing has come forward from the developer to do anything on that land, correct?
Are you talking about the hole in the donut?
No, go a little further. It's part of the H, up a little higher.
This.
Right there, yes.
No, we don't. The application doesn't include those lands. If I just go back, so this is the Bressa lands. You can see the H. It comes up and down. So this is part phase 1. It's only this portion of the whole site.
One, does it not also go straight across, though it would include the bottom part of that H?
The phase line does potentially have the ability to go across there, but it wouldn't make sense to develop that because it would in essence be landlocked. There wouldn't be an opportunity to get to it until the Dun Oak lands were developed. So Mattamy has just made the application for this portion of their land holding.
And Dun Oak hasn't come forward yet?
Dun Oak is Dun Oak is right here.
Exactly. Well, thank you. Well, that's what I'm meaning here. Like, what am I missing? Because now you've got a piece. Dun Oak is here tonight before us, along with the other part of Mattamy. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing on that one left-hand portion, which would kind of complete a nice phase 1 if you were doing anything to properly do everything. Correct?
Okay, so this is Dun Oak here in this location. Then Mattamy's Bressa is on this location. So this would be part of phase 1. I haven't asked them why they didn't include that. I expect it has to do with allocation, and their allocation request to the region would probably just accommodate the development of this portion.
Okay. And again, when you look at it, like the schools now, instead of just dealing, I think, with 2 property owners, I think in one case there you'd have to deal with at least 3. So
correct.
Good luck on getting this sorted out, staff.
Councillor Adams, if you'll just wait a second. Commissioner, are our applicants possibly confusing planning and building? The concern that's arising, as the more we talk about this, the concern that's growing for me is that these people were so coordinated for so many years. They moved only in lockstep together as we fought the 7 Years' War over this land. And now it's all piecemeal with deviant versions of the master plan, and the high degree of deviation from the master plan makes me want to know, can't we require comprehensive sets of appropriate plans to reconcile all these issues? They can build in whatever time frame they want, but why can't we require comprehensive planning to avoid this random piecemeal effect about which so many of us are complaining here tonight?
Through you, or to you, Mayor Burton, I'm not aware of any opportunity we have to require lands to come in for development. So the piece that's in the middle, we have no ability to require them to come in. We do have the intent within the secondary plan to provide for comprehensive development, and in particular for the transit first piece. So part of the transit first requirements is to ensure that we can get, for example, a bus route through there, which would mean that you'd have to somehow connect those roads together. So that's an issue that they'll need to deal with in terms of how do they deal with those comprehensive issues of providing for roads and schools and park space with only those two components coming in. And I think you'll see those issues identified in each one of those applications in terms of issues you have to deal with as we work towards a recommendation report to council.
Well, it's my view, and I think council would agree with me, and I know they'll tell me if they don't, but this concept of flexibility seems to be being overused. If we're not going to have a master plan approach here, we should have less flexibility, because in the absence of a comprehensive master planning approach here, we risk all these pieces getting out of sync with each other. So it seems to me that we have a basis in our secondary plan to limit the amount of flexibility we're willing to give people if they're not willing to proceed on a comprehensive basis. If they were going to give us a fully comprehensive plan for the area, then we could see how all the little flexibilities fit together, and we could still assure ourselves of good planning. But I'm getting the feeling that what's going on here is a bit of crash the net in hockey terms, and I don't like it. I'd like you and your legal staff to be looking more closely at just how much flexibility we really owe them in the circumstances where they're bringing all these deviant proposals.
We will certainly look at that as part of the recommendation report, and I think the discussion tonight certainly sends a message to the applicants in terms of what council is looking for in terms of what comes back again, and I'm sure they're hearing that message clearly as well.
Thank you. Councillor Adams, you are next.
You did an excellent job of summarizing, so thank you for that summary, because I think it actually captures a whole bunch of the issues that we're dealing with.
Thank you. Would you reward me with a motion to go past the hour?
Absolutely. You have that motion.
All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Councillor Adams.
So on this issue of the piecemealing and what's in and what's out, there's another piece here. So I was talking about the road network and the road network feeling like it was being moved and we're losing connectivity. There's a really important piece of the road network that I think we are missing here, which is that dash dotted line that you see going across the three properties. It's the connector transit corridor piece, and it's not really clear to me how that piece is being dealt with across the three properties. And to this question of how much flexibility or how do we deal with those pieces that get left out, there's on the property on the right, there's that piece that I think Councillor Elgar was describing as you need to have a helicopter to get to it part. Do we deal, if that continued, would we deal with that by putting a hold on that piece until such time as an application comes in for the middle piece?
Through your worship to the councillor, the bottom part of that area that you take the helicopter into, they haven't submitted an application. This isn't part of the rezoning, so they are not looking to rezone those lands?
No, sorry.
Or are you talking about the Dun Oak lands?
Well, there's two. So I'm over on. Where's their map? On page 251, if you could bring that map up, the one that's the Bressa Development Design, their draft plan of subdivision. At the very top of it, they show a crescent of some sort, which I'm not even sure if that's the original design, but. You're going to have to swim across the pond to get to it. I presume we leave that in a hold of some sort until such time as there's a agreement to get across?
Yeah, there's no access to that piece of land, so
Right.
yes, you're correct.
So, so the same, to Councillor Elgar's point around the issue of the other side of that property, I don't know what you call it, the west side of that property on the other side of the wing. Yeah, there. It really would be better if the whole thing came together. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
Maybe we could put a hold on the whole thing. Well, you know, and the hold would be until the rest of the plan shows up. Anyway, I only jest a little on that. Any other questions of staff on this? Are there any members of the public here with information for council on these items?
There. I think, try yours.
Hey, mine's back. It said going over the hour. There was a brief little moment where we had to put a nickel in the slot. All right, any members of the, any representatives of the applicants on these items here? All right, I won't quiz you about who you are. Councillor Adams.
If there's no other speakers to the matter, I'll give a motion to receive both
All right, thank
items
you.
11 and 12.
All those in favor? Carried. Does that bring us to number 13, and does that bring us to Trish? Ms. Collingwood? I know it's past the hour and everything, but we're looking forward to your report.
Thank you.
It's what we do.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Burton. The purpose of this report is to introduce the planning application for Dundas Trafalgar Inc., found on page 277 of your agenda, in conjunction with the required statutory public meeting. As noted by my report, there are no decisions to be made at this time, and the report is to be received by council. The property is located at 3075 Trafalgar Road at the northeast corner of Dundas Street and Trafalgar Road. The property has 940 meters of frontage along Trafalgar Road and 303 meters of frontage along Dundas Street. The total site area of the property is 38 hectares. There's an agricultural and landscaping supply business currently in operation on the south end of the property and no heritage interests. The east tributary EM4 of the East Morrison Creek traverses the property from east to west, at which point it meanders across Trafalgar Road a number of times as it heads south to East Morrison Creek and Dundas Street. The Region of Halton's Trafalgar Road environmental assessment is underway with the intent to construct a multimodal transportation corridor. Dundas Street is also currently being widened from Oak Park Boulevard to Highway 403 interchange to include 2 high-occupancy vehicles and 4 general-purpose lanes. The applicant seeks approval to permit the lands to be developed for a subdivision that would include medium and high-density residential uses, commercial and mixed-use buildings, roads, private lanes, a park, school, natural heritage system, and a stormwater management pond. The applicant intends to develop the lands in 4 phases, from south to north. The lands along Trafalgar Road are currently shown as reserve blocks and are intended to be the highest density development, with the intensity of uses transitioning towards the east. These lands are not proposed to be rezoned at this time and are considered to be the final phase of the 4-phase development. Adjacent to the reserve blocks are multiple blocks designated Trafalgar Urban Core. The Trafalgar Urban Core designations are intended for a mix of uses, including medium and high-density residential units. The applicant is proposing a zoning bylaw amendment that would permit general urban uses within the Trafalgar Urban Core blocks. It should be noted that these lands are intended to be the most urban area of the secondary plan. The North Oakville East Secondary Plan designates the majority of the lands as Trafalgar Urban Core, with a small portion of the lands intended for neighborhood area and natural heritage system. The proposed plan of subdivision by Dundas Trafalgar Inc. contains the components identified in the master plan excerpt shown on this slide. including the Trafalgar Road Urban Core area, the NHS, Natural Heritage System, the Stormwater Management Pond, a small amount of general urban area, and portions of a neighborhood park and an elementary school. The following issues have been identified to date. Conformity with the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. The applicant is proposing to rezone the majority of blocks that do not front onto Trafalgar at this time. Their proposal includes permissions for general urban area uses, such as detached and semi-detached units, and one-story and reduced heights of commercial buildings within the Trafalgar Urban Core blocks. The effect of a bylaw of this nature would allow low-density residential uses, such as detached and semi-detached, within a zone intended for increased densities. The Trafalgar Urban Core blocks along Dundas Street are proposed for commercial units with an overall height of 1 story. The omission of reserve blocks from the current rezoning application is something that the staff will continue to evaluate. Overall subdivision design, including the layout of the blocks, road network, transit circulation, and inclusion of cycling and pedestrian facilities is also an issue. The Trafalgar Road EA is underway, as I mentioned, and the region is currently evaluating options for the alignment of the East Morrison Creek in conjunction with the EA study and in coordination with Conservation Halton. Status within the North Oakville Landowners Agreement as it relates to this application, as noted up there, and the availability of servicing allocation. In conclusion, staff put forward the following recommendation as shown for Council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to, before I ask for questions, I just want to say on my own behalf, and I suspect on your behalf, Council, I share staff's concerns in this report, and I think some of these deviations from our plan are core deviations. I'm very concerned about it. Surprised, actually, to see that from this applicant, and I certainly hope that somehow or other they hear what I'm saying. Council, your questions. Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. I agree. So all those issues that you had on the previous slide, I support those issues. There's some additional ones which I'd like to sort of add or fill out perhaps. I think they sort of are on there already. First is on the pedestrian issue, the need to consider pedestrian easements across properties without, if there's going to be a condo corporation or something designed into how the street's going to work, we still need to be able to get pedestrians across without the condo corporation demanding to put up private gates and that sort of thing, and stopping people from being able to get through if they're going to get across over to Trafalgar Road, for example, or down to Dundas. So there was some discussion about the use of easements in favor of the town to ensure that we have pedestrian access across. The NHS was already caught there. The road alignment issues was caught there. The stormwater management pond design was one that I want to ensure that while it might become a feature for people to enjoy looking at, I wanted to ensure that it was designed in a way that we weren't going to turn it into a swimming hole or a boating hole or any of those other sort of active features, and to make sure that it was built in a way that you couldn't get access like that. So I think all the other issues were already caught, and we've already had in the other under items 9, 10, 11, and 12, we've had lots of discussion about the other ones.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Councillor Adams has covered the environmental side of it. So one of the transit first policies that we have in our plan, and I don't see this as being consistent at all with addressing transit first by gutting the high density at this time, bringing in low medium density, and we know what's going to happen. The low medium density is going to come in, and everybody's going to turn and say, oh yeah, we don't want high density there anymore. High density in this case is the perfect place. High density has to go in first. To me, this application is not complete until we have a comprehensive plan. We've got it, they've got the land, we've got a chance to do the zoning and do it now, so that anyone who buys property going forward goes into it with their eyes wide open, and then we don't deal with a mess on our hands later on in a few years' time. So I'm hoping staff will take a look at that and see what we can do in order to make it a comprehensive plan that does address transit first going forward. Because, you know, Trafalgar, it is the core road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others? Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much. You said that the reserves were omitted from the application, and then you also said that that might be considered as the latest part of the plan, Phase 4. Can you just explain that a bit more and elaborate?
Okay. Through you, Mayor Burton. The phasing starts at Dundas Street for the southern portion. So I think you can see on the slide, I'm sort of hovering over the blocks that would be considered the first phase from Street B below. Second phase, but it does not include the reserve block. Second phase is between Street C and Street B, includes the school block, the partial park block, and the pink and the green, the yellow there. Phase 3 includes all of the pink Trafalgar Urban Core blocks, as well as the general urban block in the green space. Phase 4 I would assume, since they are planning to not rezone the 3 reserve blocks, Phase 4 would be a separate application, at which time they would come back and take a look at those reserve blocks at that time.
Well, thank you. Councillor Elgar.
Again, and I think we should mention on this application also, again, we're going to build part of a school again. Like this, I think we have to get around this, and the perfect time is we roll north from Dundas to get it right, so that there, you know, there's one person, one buyer, one seller type thing, that we get this sorted out. So we wouldn't mind adding that too as a huge concern.
Thank you. You know, it's funny to see how different the proposals from the developers are, if you can remember all the big talk and the big promises that got made back in the day when all of this was part of the famous, what I like to call the 7 Years' War. I'm just struck by the distance between what was said and what's coming forward. That's really impressing me. To a councillor from the ward for a motion. Oh wait, we're in luck. We have a delegation. Laurie McPherson from Belfield.
I'm with the applicant, and I was only going to make a delegation if there were people here to speak and answer any questions, but I think the colleague was covered the presentation. Could you come down and say it so we can hear it? Oh, I'm sorry.
We don't have the best mics here. They won't reach you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had signed up for a delegation on the thought that there might be some public here to make deputations, and I wasn't sure how comprehensive the staff's presentation would be, but I think they've covered it and seen there's no people here. I'm happy to make a presentation, but I don't know that it's necessary at this point, given the hour.
Well, I'm glad you had a chance to hear council's concerns, and I hope that you, in all your expertise and experience, will be able to address them.
Yes, we've heard them, and we've been having ongoing discussions with staff.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other members of the public here with information for council on this item? Councillor Adams is moving the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Council, we need a motion to rise and report. Councillor Duddick, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, confidential consent items C1 and 2, public hearing items 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, discussion items 14, 15, and 16, as noted by the clerk. Can I have a mover and seconder for my report? Councillor Lapworth and Councillor Grant, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. Let's see, where does that take me? New business. Anybody got any new business? Would you like to congratulate or console The Rock? Wish them better luck next time.
Well, it's just so sad. They had a great season, and yes, they did lose yesterday. So, but we still love them, yes. We congratulate them on a good season, and we look forward to next year.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Councillor Adams?
Jokingly, I was going to congratulate the councillor on the medal that she brought home from the Mercedes-Benz walk. No, I didn't bring my medal, sorry.
So wait a minute here now. This sounds like humble brag. So, Councillor Adams, do I understand correctly that you ran 5K without stopping? That's impressive. I don't think I could do that even if it was for dinner. And Councillor Demoff, you did the 5K walk? Well, you're both to be congratulated for being so athletic. I guess if there's nothing else, we need a mover and a seconder for the bylaws. That'd be Councillor Elgar and Councillor Robinson. This is authority for bylaw 2013-30, 34, and 42, the confirmatory bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. That completes the agenda. Thank you for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.